time out of your evening to be here at the Brain Force event tonight. We're going to have some awesome teachings, lectures, topics by Dr. John Lieurance and Jim Kwik. My name is Bridget Cisco. I will be your moderator of the evening, and I just have some little housekeeping I want to go over before we get into the event, all right? So we want to make sure that you guys have all your questions answered tonight, but we're going to do that at the end of the session. So we have 2 boxes throughout this event, one right here behind Dr. John, and then one in the back that all of your questions can go in. That way we can do some fun Q&A at the end. Sound good? Yeah? Okay, good. All right, and then phones. Let's just make sure they're all turned all the way down. But throughout the event, you're welcome to take photos. So if you'd like to take photos, little videos, and tag Dr. John, who is at Your Out of Box Doc, and Jim Kwik on Instagram, then we can share things and share this with the people who haven't been here this evening. Yeah? Cool. There are 2 bathrooms right around here. And everyone knows that. We have drinks in the back. There's coffee, a lot of Four Sigmatic products back there, as well as a bunch of mitozen products. All of you probably saw those QR codes when you came in, so if you scan those with your phone, you can also automatically go to 3 of Dr. John's books. You can get a free session with Tara, who's over there in the white, free consultation with her, as well as any of the products right from there.
Grab my books.
All right. Thank you guys all so much for being here this morning and this evening. And I wanted to start, let's just take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. I'm going to introduce Dr. John in just a moment. We'll have Jim Kwik come up here and do his beautiful presentation. We'll then hear from Dr. John and then go into Q&A. So, Dr. John Lieurance, he's about to come up here. Let's do a little introduction for Dr. John. Dr. John Lieurance is the creator and really the brains behind this entire space. So this is the new Mitochondrial Event Center, which they're going to have a bunch of events over the next couple of months and years, so make sure you come back for all of those. He's also the brains behind Advanced Rejuvenation Clinic, helping and supporting, serving the population of here in Sarasota, as well as the world. He is the author of 3 books, which all of you guys can purchase those right back there or on that QR code. He is a scientific advisor for mitozen.com, and he's been a chiropractic neurologist for the past 27 years. So just welcoming Dr. John Lieurance. Go on up.
Thanks for this. All right. Wow. Mic check. Hello, hello. Okay, great. Wow. I can't tell you what a dream come true this is to be standing here in the event center. You know, we did have an event in December with Ben Greenfield, Elements of Vitality, which we're going to be doing next year again around the same time. But it was unfinished. They literally finished some of the basic constructions just even that day. So this is kind of the finished center here, and we're going to be holding a lot of events here and bringing in special people like Jim Kwik, and presenting, you know, some really exciting information, and having just wonderful people like yourselves gathered here to share and to learn. And you know, we all want to live our most vital, you know, healthy, happy life, right? And so, you know, my personal beliefs are that there's 3 pillars to that: vitality, dealing with identity, which kind of has to do with our belief system and where we are in this life, and how we relate to other people and to the planet, and to how we view ourselves, and then divinity, you know, our connection with Source. And so these are subjects that I'd like to dive deeply into. All friends and family. So anyway, just a little bit about Jim. He is a brain coach and a performance expert. He's worked with some very high-level elite people throughout his career. I was introduced to Jim from a mutual friend, Ben Greenfield, and I've become very good friends with him, and he has been here in the center for a couple of days now, and we've been having a lot of fun doing a lot of biohacking that you're going to hear about tonight. And he's, so, you know, the idea was, I saw Jim as an expert with being able to utilize the brain in ways that can maximize its ability. And so one of the things I've really been focused on personally is how to have adequate fuel to the brain, right? So my background in functional chiropractic neurology and naturopathic medicine is really dealing with mitochondria and brain, life force. The life force of the cell, which shows up in the brain. So we're going to be talking a lot about that when I get up after Jim speaks. Jim is going to come up and he's going to be sharing about his experience with some of the biohacking things that we've done and just overall some of his vast experiences with brain health. So without further ado, Jim Kwik.
So good to be here. How many people are excited for this evening? Yeah, this is, I have to say to Dr. John and the incredible team, how well they've taken care of me the past couple of days. So I just want to start there. I don't know if you're a patient or a client here, but you might have seen this on social media. I had a baby 2 weeks ago. Thank you. But I haven't, yay, that's it. But I haven't gotten a lot of sleep, so new parent. And so having the past couple of days with you and your team taking care of me, you really poured into me. So I really appreciate it. Thank you, thank you. So my goal here is to pour into you, this next hour, and then a little bit later with the question and answers. How many of you, this is called Brain Force, and by the way, I love that, you should trademark that, otherwise I'm gonna take it. That's awesome. How many of you came here today because you like to have a better brain? Raise your hand. How many of you came here today because you like to have a better memory? How many of you forgot why you came here today? We start there. Have you ever done that? Have you ever walked into a room of your own home and then just forgot why you're there? Anyone feel like senior moments are coming way too early? Like you read a page in a book and then you just forget what you just read?
It starts after the first baby.
After, like mommy brain. Or maybe you're absent-minded. When you wonder why, you're in mental fog, brain fog, you can't remember, you go to the store to buy one thing and you come back with like 2 bags full of things, except for that thing that you went there for. Or maybe you misplace things. Does anyone know somebody loses things all the time? Like their cell phone, their wallet, their purse, their remote control, their car keys, or if not their car key is something much larger like your car. You ever see the people in the parking lot using their car alarm like GPS, trying to figure out where they parked the car that day? And they realize they took like Uber or something like that. And how about names and faces? Have you ever met somebody, you get their name and then seconds later, their name just disappears out of your mind? So that's the nature of my work. I help people to have better brains because I had a traumatic brain injury. It was a challenge growing up as a kid. I had learning disabilities, I was put in special classes. It took me 3 years longer to learn how to read. If anyone's had those kind of challenges or knows someone's gone through that. When I was 9 years old, I was slowing down a class and I was being teased really badly for it. A teacher came to my defense, but all I remember her doing, she pointed to me in front of the whole class and said, "Leave that kid alone. That's the boy with the broken brain." And that adults have to be very, how many of you have kids? How many of you once were a kid? Adults have to be very careful with their words because an adult's external words become a child's internal words, right? So every single time I did badly in school, which was every day, how would I say, "Oh, because I have the broken brain." And every time I was in pick for sports, which is all the time, it was like, "Oh, because I have the broken brain." And I always talk to people about mindset, and I'm going to walk you through something I don't really teach. I don't really talk about what I do specifically to maintain my brain in terms of brain force and energy, but I'm going to share my personal protocol. A lot of the stuff you can find on my podcast, or it's 95% of what we publish is free. So you have lots of videos. Anyone listen to any verse? Yeah. So you can find it, and it really, even our podcast is 20 minutes long. I just had the opportunity to interview Dr. John for a couple episodes, so I can't wait for that episode to come out. But there are no sponsors, and so it's one of the most binge listened shows in the world like tens of millions of downloads, because it's just, you can listen to like 3 or 4 or 5, 6 episodes really fast because it's short and no ads, right? So that's our goal, because I grew up with a broken brain. I want to help build better, brighter brains. So let's get into it. I haven't seen this presentation. My team literally just made it just for you. Before we get started, why don't we stand up real quick? You're like, oh, he's one of those guys. And what I want you to do is how many of you, talking about kids, who are the fastest learners on the planet? Children, right? How fast can they learn a musical instrument compared to an adult? How fast can they learn another language compared to an adult? And part of it is they're willing to play. So I'm just going to ask you at home watching this, or if you're here, how many of you are willing to play to learn this better tonight? Great. Well, I'm going to test you on this. Meet somebody new and introduce yourselves, and partner up with one person. And if you're at home watching this, I'll be your partner. But move around, introduce yourself, go.
Is there any way you can use your phone? Because nobody's on live stream. I think it has to go through your phone.
On my Instagram?
The thought is I can invite you to join. We have to prop your phone up somewhere.
Yeah, let me,
We can prop it up right here. So I'm going to invite.
you don't have to invite me, because then it
goes on both.
All right, so let's go just kind of real quick. Like, well, all we're going to do is it's going to be really fun. So what I'm going to do with your partners or partners, you can get groups of 2 or 3, it doesn't matter. And if you're watching at home, I'll do it with you at home. And just, I'm going to ask you to move your body in a certain way. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is take your hand, either your hand or your elbow, and just lift your opposite knee and just go back and forth. And watch your partner do it also. So we're going to activate your mirror neurons. Back and forth to the best of your ability, And if you're watching this at home, do this at home also as well. All right, try this with your partner. What I want you to do is shake out your hands, and just massage your earlobe with the opposite hand, and the other one also. And what I'm going to ask you to do is you're going to inhale and you're going to squat down, and then exhale and come on up. Inhale, go down. Exhale, come on up. Inhale, go down. Exhale, go up. Look at your partner, make sure they're doing it also. Inhale, go down. Exhale, go up. Now look at your partner and show them your billion-dollar smile. See who can make the bigger smile. Go. Bigger smile. You can let go of your hands. That's okay. Your biggest smile. All right. Have a seat. All right, you can start. I don't know if they're going to be able to hear it because you're covering the microphone. So it has to be lifted. You could use this one. All right, if you're watching this at home, I would use that stand there. And then, hi everybody. All right, we're going to go live. All right, everybody. So let's begin. So I always start this. If you take notes, I really encourage you to take some notes while you're here. There's a learning curve, but there's also a forgetting curve, right? How many of you ever listen to a podcast, you read a book, and then you just kind of forget it? What percentage do you forget within 48 hours? 80%. 80%. So until you have some memory technology and tools, then just at least even in a notebook or your notepad in your phone, I encourage you to take some notes also as well. All right, so I'm going to share with you some of my favorite biohacks here. Before we do, just the principle of moving around. 2 things. As your body moves, your brain grooves. Please write that down. As my body moves, my brain grooves. As my body moves, my brain grooves. When you move your body, you literally create brain-derived neurotropic factors, BDNF, which is like fertilizer for your brain. It enhances neuroplasticity. And that's why I'm so excited about this conversation, because your brain is the ultimate adaptation machine. It is your greatest wealth-building device. Hardly nobody is paid completely just for their muscle power. It's your mind power today, right? It's not your brute strength today, it's your brain strength. The challenge is your brain doesn't come with an owner's manual, and it's not user-friendly. And so I really wish this was what we're going to talk about here was taught to us as kids. And how many people agree with that? Like, school is a great place to learn sometimes what to learn, math, history, science, Spanish, you name it. But there is not many classes on how to learn those things, right? There's no class called focus. Like, going to a child and saying focus or concentrate is like going to them and saying play the ukulele. And they've never taken a class or any kind of training on how to do that. Well, there's no classes on how to focus. There's no classes even on memory, right? On how to memorize something, so that's a challenge. I always thought it should have been the fourth R in school. You have reading, writing, arithmetic, but what about recall? What about retention, right? Socrates said learning is remembering. And so I'm gonna give you some tips on how to improve your memory. I'm gonna go into the biohacks that I use to enhance my brain power and optimize my cognitive function. But before I do, I just want to remind everyone, if you're familiar with my work, there are 6 things you need to do to learn any subject or skill faster. 6 things. And this is a refresher for some of you that have listened to our content before, but it's just a reminder, all right? I want you to remember be fast. Very fast. Just write it down, be fast. It's an acronym, be fast. And so the B stands for believe, all right? And please write that down. Believe you can or believe you can't, either way, what? You're right, right? Henry Ford said that. Your brain is this incredible supercomputer, and your self-talk is the program it will run. So if you tell yourself, I'm not good at remembering names, you will not remember the name of the next person you meet because you program your supercomputer not to. Does that make sense? All right, so we always have to be conscious. So some people say like, oh, I don't have a great memory. Just say yet, right? I don't have a great memory yet, right? Those little things, if you truly understood how powerful your mind is, you wouldn't say or think something you didn't want to be true. That's how powerful your mind is always eavesdropping on your self-talk. All right, so I always start with the B is believe. I'll show you a quick exercise. Stand up real quick and do this at home too. I challenge you to do this at home. Wherever you're watching this, do this at home. All right, so make some space for the person next to you. I started doing this exercise 25 years ago. That's where your feet are. And what I want you to do is point forward with your right hand. Everyone point forward with your right hand. Make sure everyone's using the right hand. So this is the first test. All right, without moving your feet, turn to your right as far as you could go. And notice exactly, take a snapshot of where you're pointing in your mind, a mental snapshot. Go as far as you can go, take a picture in your mind, come back center. Now, empty your hands, put your arms by your side, not in your pocket. I'm going to take you through a quick 30-second exercise. Take a deep breath, exhale, breathe normally, and just close your eyes. I want you to imagine as you breathe normally that you're pointing forward again with your right hand, but this time I want you to see and feel yourself turning twice as far. So imagine you're going twice as far as you did the first time. If you can't imagine it, imagine that you could imagine it, all right? See and feel yourself going twice as far. And it's a great stretch. And again, with your eyes closed, see and feel yourself going 3 times around, like you're made out of rubber. And then one more time with a big smile on your face, thinking, what does this have to do with memory? Put a big smile on your face and see and feel yourself going 4 times around. 1, 2, 3. All right, now watch this. Open your eyes, everyone. Point forward with your right hand. Watch this. Turn to your right now, as far as you can now go. Wow, I wish everyone could see this. All right, wait, clap if you went further the second time. All right, have a seat, have a seat. Now, my question for you, and I hope you're doing this at home if you're watching us and they're recorded or live, were you physically capable of turning that far the first time? Yes, right? Nobody took a yoga class when our eyes were closed, right? You're able to. Where was the limitation if there was one? In your mind, right? And you're like, I didn't have a belief on how far I could turn. How many beliefs do you think you have in here? And so write this down. All behavior is belief-driven. See, I could teach you a technique on how to learn a language or how to remember names, but if you don't believe it's possible, you're going to be stuck in that box. Does that make sense? So I always want to address the thing that really holds us back is our psychology often, right? And so your brain is like a supercomputer, you know, and your self-talk is a program it's going to run. So just be very conscious of that. That's the first thing. Now, this exercise we did is kind of interesting because I use this a lot with athletes. They don't do just physical training anymore. What do athletes do? They do mental training, right? They do visualization. They see the ball going through the hoop, right? Or in the hole, or the shot going, you know, on this part of the court. And so what we're here about is about transcending. This is about transcending. It's about ending the trance, ending this mass hypnosis through media or marketing that we're limited, right? That says that, like I was told, like that you're broken, that you're not enough, right? And so my thing is to give people references, and the best reference you could have is coming from inside, because it's not, Dwayne Dyer said this, one of my mentors. He said that it's not that you'll believe it when you see it, it's the opposite. You'll see it when you believe it, right? And so that's the important part. Like this exercise, what did Roger Bannister do in 1954? The 4-minute mile, right? Throughout human history, nobody can run a mile sub 4 minutes. He was able to do it, if you saw the ESPN documentary, because he would visualize himself crossing the finish line, and it says 3 minutes and 59 seconds, right? Because he knows what you know, that success is an inside-out process, right? That wasn't the interesting part, though. Nobody could do it for all this time. One person does it. What happens after that? Yeah, everyone starts breaking, right, the 4-minute mile. Now, were there big advances in shoe technology and nutritional support in training methodology? Where was the change? Belief, right? Because the belief back then was not only was it not possible, it was that your heart would explode in your chest, right? And that would keep you from running a 4-minute mile, right? That would keep, I'm a runner, right? With a name like Kwik, I had to be a runner, right? And so that all behavior is belief-driven, right? In fact, here, let me show you an exercise. How many of you really struggle with, I call it it's called digital dementia. How many phone numbers did you used to know growing up? A lot. How many? Like all of them, right? How many phone numbers currently? I know you probably know your old phone numbers, but how many current phone numbers do you know? 0? You know your own number, hopefully, right? And what else? What else? Like maybe 1 or 2. How many of you, there's a person you text or call every single day, but if your phone was dead, you honestly, you wouldn't know what that first phone number is. How embarrassing, right? And not that I want to memorize 500 phone numbers, but it should be concerning we've lost the ability to remember 1. Or a PIN number, or a passcode, or something we just read, right? Or a credit card, or whatever it happens to be. Let's do a group exercise right now. I'm going to give you a list. Let's come up with a list of numbers, and let's do our best we can to memorize it. Because then I'm going to teach you a couple tricks on how to improve your memory, right? Now, when I said that I'm going to quiz you on this, how many of you get a little stressed out? Wow. And that's part of it, too, because all learning is state dependent. The reason we did this exercise, kind of moving our body and smiling and all those things, is because if you learn something in a bored state, you're not going to remember it, right? And that's the challenge. And so we have to make it more interactive. So let's come up with a list of numbers to memorize as a group. And then notice at a meta level, coach yourself. How are you going about memorizing this, right? And then I'll give you a couple of tips on how you can do it. So let's do it together. Actually, why don't you raise your hand, someone raise your hand and shout out, for time's sake, let's do 2-digit numbers, all right? So raise your hand and just, I'll call on you and then say a 2-digit number. Yes? 31, and I'll repeat it because I have the microphone so people at home can hear also as well. So everyone write down 31. We're not going to do like 50 different numbers. We're going to do one number as a group, right? So the first one is what? 31. Good. All right, so you got it? All right, so we'll go through this. Yes? 64? All right, 64. Yes? 18. All right, 18. Now, if we're having trouble coming up with numbers, we have to go in a totally different direction in this trail. I'm going to tell you that right now. All right, 18. Yes. 22. Bingo. Watch this be like the lottery numbers or something. All right, 22. Yes. 53. Okay, 53. How many numbers is that, by the way, so far? And I hope you're doing this at home also as well. What's that? 10 digits. That's 10 total digits. Okay. Yes. 11. All right, 11. Yes, all the way in the back. 17. Wow, the number's getting, how many of you getting a little like, you're memorizing this is getting like a little bit, yeah, no doubt. Yes. 37. What's that? 30, sorry, there's an echo also. 37. All right, so before that was what? 17, and now we have 37. I should be memorizing this too. Tim's like, oh, dizzy. Let me see. Hopefully I got these, some of them. Yes? 95. And before that was 37, and then 95, right? All right. Getting a little nervous here. Yes? 16. All right, 16. How many total numbers are we at now? Single digits. How many single digits? 20. Right? Okay, so that's like 3 phone numbers so far, right? Let's do a few more. All right, yes. 27. 27. Yes. 69. 27, 69. All right. Are we, okay, a couple more, everyone. 82. 82. Let's just do like 2 more. 12. 12. And 23. Very good, 12 and 23. All right, how many single digits are we at now? 30. All right, let's stop there. Now, how many do you think you remember? Honestly, like if you were to close your eyes and go through it, how many of these do you think you'd retain out of the 30? 10? Most people do like 5 to 9. They call it 7 plus or minus 2. There was a study done at Harvard by George Miller saying we could hold in our 7 plus or minus 2. All right? Let's see how many you know. Let me see if I remember these. All right? Cover your pages. I have pretty good vision also. And obviously there's nothing I can see here. But I'll do the best I can to memorize as many of these numbers as I can. I'll do single digits. All right? So 3, 1, 6, 4, 1, 8. How am I doing? Good. 2, 2, 5, 3, 1, 1, 1, 7, 3, 7. How are we doing? Good. All right, 9, 5, 1, 6, 2, 7, 6, 9. How are we doing? Great. 8, 2, 1, 2, 2, 3. Thank you. You can do hearts on the screen. So my point in doing this is I don't do this to impress you. I really do this to express to you what's possible because I couldn't do that, right? With my learning difficulties, I had very poor memory, very poor focus. Honestly, we could do 100 numbers and I could do it because it would just take longer of your time, right? People always ask like backwards. Can I try to do it backwards? Wait, I need some encouragement here. All right, backwards, ready? Yeah, that's a joke. Let me try to do it backwards, ready? And I can't see the live stream comments here, so I can't see the number, but all right, backwards. 3, 2, 2, 1, 2, 8, 9, 6, 7, 2, 6, 1, 5, 9, 7, 3, 7, 1, 1, 1, 3, 5, 2, 2, 8, 1, 4, 6, 1, 3. All right, so let's, again, this is like remember Roger Bannister did something, people didn't think it was possible, and then it opens up what's possible. Please write this down. There's no such thing as a good or bad memory. There's a trained memory and an untrained memory. And I promise you ask me 2 hours later tonight what those numbers were, and I'll have them. Or you send me a message on Instagram like a week from now, and I'll have it. Because when you understand how your memory works, you could work your memory. Now, how useful would this have been back in school? Right? Or even in your job. How many of you have to remember client information, product information, sales script? How many of you would love to give a speech without notes? Right? Like to be able to do that because of fear of like fear that you're going to forget something, right? So we can all do this with simple tools and training. Again, there's no such thing as a good or bad brain. There's a trained brain and an untrained brain. And what I love about what we're doing tonight is, like I usually deal with the software part. I could show you this process for learning a language faster, to read 3 times faster, to understand what you read, to have better focus. But it's kind of like the software of a computer. You also have to take care of the hardware, which is what I've been doing the past couple of days here with Dr. John and our team, because I could teach somebody great method for focusing or reading better. How many of you have books on your shelf you haven't read yet? Let's be honest. And it becomes shelf help, not self-help, right? But if you have issues here and there's challenges here, like this is not optimized, you don't have enough energy or brain force, it's going to be really hard to follow through, right? If you're falling asleep while you read, right? If you're very forgetful, if you don't deal with those kind of issues. And so let's go through the rest of this. The rest of the Be Fast, very quickly, I'm going to go through my biohacks. The E is exercise, all right? Because remember, there's no such thing as a good or bad memory. There's a trained memory and untrained memory. And this is really about your brain's like a muscle. It's use it or lose it, right? Like what I am is like like a personal trainer, makes your body stronger, greater endurance, more flexibility, agility. I want your brain to be that, to have greater endurance, greater strength, greater focus, right? Greater flexibility in your thinking and your mental agility. Having words not on the tip of your tongue, but it's like right at your mental fingertips, right? So you need to practice. So there's no such thing as a good or bad memory. You just have to exercise it. And I think one of the best exercises is reading. Like if you have seen pictures of me with Elon or Oprah or wherever, we bonded. People always went over books. Because you read to succeed. If somebody has decades of experience, like Dr. John does, and he puts it into a book, and you can sit down in a few days and read that book, you could download decades of his experience in days. There is no greater advantage in life, period. Because knowledge is not only power today, knowledge is profit, right? And the faster you can learn, the faster you can earn. But nobody teaches you how to learn these things, right? And so exercise is a muscle. If your memory is strong, you don't have to use even a technique because it's trained, right? It's flexed. The F in Be Fast, if you want to learn faster, you want to start by forgetting. This is kind of the Zen beginner's mind. A lot of people don't learn faster because they feel like they know it already. And that could keep you from learning, right? So it's that whole parable of, the guy who goes to the master and he starts, he thinks he knows everything. And he really wants to show him like this master up, but he's like pouring the tea, the master, the guru, and all of a sudden it just overflows and overflows, and then he's like, wait, it's overflowing, and he's like, oh yeah, you have to empty it to be able to put more in. Same thing with the mind. Your brain is like a parachute. It only works when it's what? When it's open. That's like our mind. Your mind is like a parachute, only works when it's open. So you need to be able to keep an open mind because we don't know. Like most people with their memory, like you would have memorized those numbers. How do you do it? Like you did it through rote, right? Repetition. You went 3, 1, right? 6, 4, 1, 8, 2, 2, 5, 3, right? And repetition, the problem is that they've been doing that for hundreds of years, and that doesn't work today because the amount of information is going like this, right? You know how much information, I did a program at Google, and the chairman, the amount of information he says that's been created since human beings walked the planet to the year 2003. Right, just 20 years ago. All that information, how long does it take to take that much information and create that today? 2 days. Yeah, you think about all the podcasts and YouTube, people there's just so much information. So the amount of information is like this, but how we read it, learn it, remember it, it's like this. So that growing gap, information anxiety, higher blood pressure, compression of leisure time, more sleeplessness, right? Because we're not equipped for today's load. We live in an age of autonomous electric cars, spaceships that are going to Mars. But when we're driving, our vehicle is like a horse and buggy. They say if Rip Van Winkle woke up today, the guy who slept for decades, the only thing he would recognize in this whole world are classrooms. And that's not a slight against teachers. My mother became a special ed teacher. She just retired recently in public school system to help me with my challenges. But it's a systemic issue, right? The world has changed, but the system hasn't changed as much, right? And teachers are some of the most caring, capable, committed, compassionate individuals. They're not, in my opinion, compensated the way they should be. But what I would just love to do is just show people what they're really possible by showing them how to be able to use this in school. That's it. So that's the F. You need to forget what you know about a subject. I would also say for those of you who have focus issues, forget about distractions. Because how many of you feel like you're always, to keep up, you multitask a lot? How many of you yeah. You're not actually multitasking. the research is pretty conclusive. You're task switching. You're going from one thing to another. Because the brain can't do two cognitive activities consciously at once. So what you're doing is, when you're checking email, a certain part of your brain, that neurological web is lit up. But if you just switch from that to doing something else, then you lose time. The thing you think you're gaining, multitasking, it could take 5 minutes just to regain your focus. Not only does it cost you time, it costs you error and mistakes. Right? They know surgeons make more mistakes during surgery if they try to multitask. Right? It's you know what it is? We can all relate to? People who text and drive. They're trying to multitask, and you can't be doing this cognitive activity and this cognitive activity. That's how dangerous it is, right? And so you're gonna make more errors at your work. And then finally, use more energy. You waste energy trying to use more brain glucose to be able to task switch, as opposed to, like what I do is I time chunk and I do all the same activities at once, right? And then all my calls at once, as best I can, right? But I definitely don't want to multitask because I lose those 3 things. So that's the F. Forget about what you know, forget about distractions. The A is active, and that's exactly what I'm asking you to do here. You notice I ask a lot of questions, I ask you to take notes. You're just being active in your learning. I ask you to stand up and turn and do all these things, because learning is not a spectator sport. It just isn't. The days where you're just, it's not so much the teacher's responsibility, whether it's in school or in life, or the human brain doesn't consume information. It actually does better, it learns better through creating and co-creating. That the onus is on our students to be able to take responsibility for their own learning. It's a cooperative, right? We share in that responsibility, but it's not, you can't do it passively, because you can't push information. A teacher can't push information inside of a kid, right? And so we learn better through asking questions, through creating, through experimentation. And so what I would say is to be active, like taking notes, right? How many of you take handwritten notes over digital note-taking? How many prefer digital note-taking? All right, most people handwriting notes. Me too. So when university students are tested for retention and comprehension, which is what counts, handwriting notes actually is better. Now think about it. I could type, most people could type pretty fast, and so you could probably maybe even type as fast as I could talk, but you can't possibly handwrite as fast as I could talk, right? So what does it force you to do? You have to filter, right? And you start to personally organize that information. So what I would do, handwriting, a whole brain note-taking technique, I did a whole podcast on, if you search Jim Kwik note-taking, you'll see lots of videos. But try this, on a piece of paper, put a line right down the page, and on the left side, you capture, on the right side, you create. Capture, create method, very simple, left brain, right brain. Left brain, on the left side, you're note-taking, right side, you're note-making. So on the left side, how you read faster, what are the best brain foods, right? The favorite biohack, you're capturing. But if your attention is going to go somewhere else, you're going to get distracted, your imagination, your right brain is going to take you somewhere else, I'd rather take you on the right side of the page. And you're going to write your impressions of what you're capturing. How am I going to use this? What questions do I have in the Q&A, right? How does this relate to what I already know? Those kind of things, right? That's a way of being more active. And then finally, the S and the T and be fast, and I'm going to get to the biohacks. S is state. And we covered that, all learning is state dependent. Here's the key to long-term memory. Say this and do this. Put your hand out and say, information. Combined with emotions, become long-term memories. One more time, information, do it at home. Combined with emotions, become long-term memory. Information by itself is forgettable. You are inundated with information. The only thing that you retain are the things that drive your feelings. Right, that middle brain, your hippocampus, is connected to your amygdala, where you're processing a lot of emotions. Simple. How many of you, there's a song, you could hear a few notes, and they take you back to when you're a teenager, right? Because the information with emotion. How many of you, there's a food or fragrance that could take you back to when you're a child, right? So when you add emotion, but the problem is let's go back to school. What was the primary emotion you felt sitting in class? Honestly. Boredom. So what's boredom on a scale of 0 to 10? What's boredom? 0, right? Information times emotion. If it's boredom or 0, what's anything times 0? 0. And you wonder why you forgot the periodic table or the things that we learned, right? So add emotion. But here's the thing. If learning, so information is energy, right? But how do you add more energy into it? Sit the way you'd be sitting right now if you were more energized and interested in what I was saying. Sit the way if you're really focused and interested. Now, why do you even have to move? But But I'm going to call you, as your coach, I'm going to call you on your stuff. Your physiology, you know that you can control your focus because you just started doing it, right? Whether or not you own that and do it is a different story, but the onus is on us, right? Because you're a thermostat, you're not a thermometer. A thermometer just reacts to the environment, reacts to weather, reacts to politics, reacts to how people treat them. The happiest people, you know, they're more of a thermostat, right? Thermostat doesn't react to the environment. It gauges, it knows the temperature, of course, but what does it do? It sets a temperature, right? It sets a goal, it sets a standard, and then what happens to the environment? The environment reacts to it, right? So you always want to have that responsibility. And I think, you know, you all have a to-do list, right? We all have to-do lists. Add a to-feel list. Like wake up in the morning, before you look at your to-do list, say, these are the 3 emotions I want to feel today. Because you don't have emotions, you do them. You don't have love, right? It's a process. You could be love, right? I love Harry. Harry has this incredible quote. I just learned so much, and I was taking all these notes in my mind. He's like, you know, human beings that we don't most people are we're all seeking love, you know, and we could just be love. And that's, so you have your to-be list, right? In fact, when you're faced with a decision or a dilemma, most people are like, what do I need to do? But what if you step back and say, like, who do I need to be? Like, if you're going to be compassionate, the doing kind of takes care of itself. Yes? Yes. Okay. So, and then the 2 most powerful words in the English language are I am, the shortest words. I am, because whatever you put after it is like your life, right? Your identity, that force. We're talking about forces, like brain force. But that's an incredible force to remain consistent with how we define ourselves, right? It's really hard to get people to create a new habit or to meditate or to procrastinate or to do something if they think I am a procrastinator, right? To read or do something else. So that all these things are all in the area of mindset. And then finally, after state, we control our state, T is teach. And I just want to remind you, the fastest way to learn anything is to learn it with the intention of teaching somebody else. Because you take advantage of something in science called the explanation effect. When you learn something, to explain it to somebody else, you're going to learn it faster. That just makes sense. So as you go through the rest of this evening, I would challenge you and say, like, you know, think about somebody outside that you wish was here. Or like, imagine you have to give a TEDx talk next week on some of the things that you learned. You would learn it so much better, right? You would own that information. You would take better notes. You would ask more questions. So learn it with the intention of teaching, and you're going to learn it better. How are we on time? Just on, okay, perfect. So we're going to, perfect. So I'm going to go through these slides. I honestly just peruse this on my phone. I will put some of these slides on social media, maybe, so that way, if you follow me there, I can make sure I can get it to you. I can't go through all of this, so. All right, I'm just going to give you the highlight of this part. This is the key that makes everything work. I'm going to be very bold, I think, in life. I honestly think that if you know something and you're not doing it, one of these 3 things are not being addressed. And I call it the limitless model. If you have my book, there's a nice diagram in there and explains it all. But the limitless model is everything for me, and I would do it injustice if I didn't take 2 minutes to explain this. Limitless is not about being perfect. Limitless is about advancing and progressing beyond what you currently believe is possible. Is there a way of moving this so they could maybe put it more center? Or to make sure it's not blocking anyone who's here also. But like maybe like, I don't know if they could see, if you could see. But the limitless model, so limitless is about advancing and progressing. But if you feel stuck, if you feel like, I want you to think about, you don't have to share it, but think about an area of your life where you feel like you're in a box. All right, where you feel like you're stuck. Area of health, finances, could be your learning, reading speed, could be your memory. Where do you feel like you're stuck in a box? You're not making progress even if you're trying. Now that 3D box is 3-dimensional. So by definition, there's 3 forces that contain that box, right? The 3 forces are represented by these 3 circles, these 3 M's. And the key, if you were to set a goal here, to get your goal, whatever it is, you want to make a certain amount of money, get amount of followers, have this certain level of health, you need to address all 3, and if it's not, you won't. It's different that you could attain something and sustain it, all right? These are the 3 keys to sustain it. And we already talked about mindset. So the first M is your mindset. Because the bottom one are the methods. And there are plenty of methods. You know what to do. If you're here, you probably have forgotten more about health or wellness or personal development than most of your friends will ever learn. Is that true? right? Some of your friends probably how do you, I have no idea how you explain to your friends and family where you are right now, personally. But I promise you, you know more than they do about this subject if you're here. It's probably like your first go at this. So you know what to do. But if you're not doing what you know, common sense is not common practice. It's your mindset and your motivation that need to be addressed, right? Because I could teach you a great method on how to read faster, how to remember names, but your mindset is, I'm not smart enough, I don't think it's possible, or your motivation, you're just, you have no drive to do it, you're not gonna do it, right? So my thing here, is a whole bunch of information here. The thing I do want to address is motivation, because you're gonna learn a lot here, from Dr. John, and how many of you are actually gonna do it? Because the truth is, it's BS that knowledge is power. I'm gonna call you on your BS, your belief systems. It's not true that knowledge is power. Knowledge is potential power at best. It becomes power when we what? When we apply it, when we utilize it, when we implement it, right? And this is really the key. Because let's say you learn something, how to remember names, how to be healthy, whatever, but your mindset says, I'm not capable of it, I don't deserve it, then you're gonna self-sabotage. If you're not motivated, you're not gonna do it, you're gonna procrastinate. And that's where that comes from. Now, by the way, for motivation, the key for motivation, 3 keys. This is the formula for limitless motivation. For you, for your kids, for your clients. If you can't motivate them to buy or clean their room, this is the key. P times E times S3. This is the formula. P, the letter P, times E times S3. The P stands for purpose. If you don't have a reason to get healthy, you're not going to do this. But it can't be intellectual. I saw somebody, I wouldn't call them a friend, but I saw them recently, and I didn't recognize them. The backstory is this person was extremely unhealthy. And we tried to, I was part of mutual friends trying to get him to do some stuff and everything, and he take it in but wouldn't apply it, right? Now, I see him on the street, and he's like, I didn't even recognize him because he looked super fit and happy and healthy, and I was just like, I have to know, because I think genius leaves clues that we can learn from everybody, right? Especially children. And I was like, what happened? She's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm doing this, and I do this photobiomodulation, about like cold therapy and ice baths. I'm like, yeah, I know a little bit about that. And he's like, I was like, but you've been telling me that for years. He's like, yeah, like I had this thing where came home from a business trip, and my daughter like was crying, and then I found out she had a dream that I died, and I wasn't there to take care of her. And it's like, and then so purpose, when I say purpose, not intellectual, because we know why we should do things, but if we're not feeling it, we're not going to do it. So the P stands for purpose in your heart. It has to go from your head to your heart to your hands. If you have a goal in your head, you know what to do, and you're not acting with your hands, check in with the second H, which is your heart, right? Emotions, because we're not logical, we are biological. I mean, you think about the conversations we have, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, we're this chemical feeling soup, right? But if nothing don't touch us here, we're not going to do anything, right? The P times the E is what, with Dr. Johnson, is energy. Like, I could teach you a great method on how to read faster, and you can have the mindset that reading is good, I deserve it, I'm capable of doing it. But if you had a big processed meal and you're in a food coma, you're not going to want to read or work out. If you haven't slept in 3 nights because you have a new kid, then you're not going to be very motivated to go to the gym, right? So you need energy, right? And we could talk about some of the things that would enhance your energy. And then finally, you could have limitless purpose and limitless energy and still not follow through. S3 stands for small, simple steps. Small, simple steps. And I just want to repeat this, that sometimes, think about this logically. If you're not acting on something, you either don't have purpose or you don't have enough energy to follow through, fuel, right? You haven't optimized your mitochondria, your ATP, or this thing is just too big. It's too intimidating. It's too, you're confused. And a confused person doesn't do anything. And that's what the challenge is with health. That's why I enjoyed my conversation today with Dr. John, because he knows so much, but he simplified it, right? Because you can read lots of books on health and be totally confused. Let's just be honest, right? And so small, simple steps, that's what S3 stands for. So let's say you want to work out. Working out, you want to work out each day or whatever. But if you're not doing it, a small, simple step, put on your running shoes, right? If you want to read an hour a day or 30 minutes a day, maybe that's too intimidating. opening up a book, small, simple step, reading one line. Because nobody's gonna, like, if you can't get your kids to floss their teeth, and that's good for your brain, right? Good oral hygiene, and we talked about that today also as well. Get them to floss one tooth. Because who's gonna stop at one tooth, right? So small, simple, little by little, a little becomes a lot. So that's just what I wanted to highlight here. I did a whole podcast. If you search Jim Kwik Limitless Model, you can see all these graphs. I only have a few minutes, so I'm gonna go through this. I share frameworks because I feel like if you could change the lens in terms of how you see something, that's more powerful because the lens you see something through changes everything, right? And so I tend to alliterate a lot, right? Mindset, motivation, methods, alliterate a lot. 4 R's, right? You reach, you replenish, you restore, and then you rest. Like I tend to categorize things so I can see how like when I read a book or whatever, I can organize it so I can understand it better. Because you can't be reaching all the time. You can't be stretching yourself all the time. You can't be working all the time, right? You work hard, but you have to rest hard also as well. So very quickly, reaching is about consistent challenge, right? Challenging yourself physically or mentally or whatever your goal happens to be. But with challenge comes change. That's how adaptation works. Neuroplasticity works, right? New learnings work, or even building a muscle. You give it challenge, and then it changes, it adapts. Same thing with your mental muscles. These are some of my favorite things, and I get nothing from this, right? But physical exercise. And by the way, I'm going to show some things here that require an investment, but a lot of the stuff that's out there is just to mimic nature, right? Like photobiomodulation, you can get some sunlight, right? It's great to go to cryotherapy machine, but you could also take a cold shower. So they're all alternatives, right? My favorite, because people ask, is because time is a big thing, for me, because with family and I have 3 books coming, like I have a lot, like everybody else does. I use NewFit. If some of you are familiar, I'm not going to go through this. ARX is a favorite of mine. Carol Bike. If you go to jimkwik.com/more, it's a link in my Instagram also as well. I put like 6 free resources, including a 1-hour masterclass on speed reading. So you could just get that. There's, again, 95% of what I put out there is just, we want to democratize this, make it available to the world. All I ask is that if you get value out of it, maybe share it with somebody else that can benefit, because that's how we'll be able to help more people. So here, it's just cognitive training. I think it's the best. I think if there's one capability to learn how to learn. Right? If you can learn how to focus, concentrate, remember, understand, you can apply that towards medicine, marketing, money, Mandarin, music, martial arts, a lot of M's there, but everything gets easier, right? Learn how to learn, you can grant all your other wishes. For reaching, I am a big fan of cold. I met Wim Hof in 2012, a little over 10 years ago, so I've been doing cold therapy, ever since. Many people have their thing. I got a cold plunge and it just works for me. But cold showers, how many of you do some kind of cold therapy? All right, amazing. Lowers inflammation, neuro reset. You got the dopamine and norepinephrine. Foods, neuronutrition. I wrote a whole chapter in Limitless about some of my favorite brain foods. Neuronutrition, your brain is we talk about as an energy hog. It's only 2% of your body mass, but it requires 20% of the oxygen, of the nutrients. And some of the other nutrients are nutrients different than the rest of the body. You can get it through food and diet, and I have this whole thing. If you search Jim Kwik brain foods, I'll not only share with the favorite brain foods I could cover in the Q&A, but I also could show you how to memorize them really easy, like in 2 minutes. But you can also get it through supplementation. These are some of my favorites, like the main, but there's so many of them. I added that, the methylene blue of recent. I just did an IV today on it. It just, for all the cognitive benefits. But again, I follow me on social media or get our list. I'm sure we'll make these slides available. And then the restore. So you could replenish with nutrients, but you also need to restore the body. These are some of my favorite things. Now, keep in mind, you could also meditate, which I prefer doing that before you buy anything, honestly. Right? I meditate every day. It's just part of my thing. I feel like I'm at a disadvantage if I don't meditate. Some of my favorite things here I list here, including I added the shift wave that you have here, which is amazing in terms of kind of rejuvenating, getting back in that natural state, parasympathetic place. New Calm, I will mention, I do have a vested interest in this. If you go to quickstates.com, I've never promoted this publicly before, quickstates.com, they have a patented acoustic technology, sound technology, that really drives into the nervous system and the brainwave states, and I did the tracks for that. And so it's my voice teaching you how to focus and how to memorize. So go to quickstates.com and you can find out more about that. And then I'm just kind of finishing up here. I just have to mention this also for, again, the natural status community. I just did an interview with Dr. Waldinger out of Harvard University, the longest longevity happiness study in the world, 84 years. And they found, I asked them, is it diet, is it exercise? What's the #1 marker? Relationships, right? Whether it doesn't matter if you're what cultural background, if you're married or not, just having bonds with other human beings help with their happiness, and you should listen to that episode. And then all the sleep hacks, and we could talk about in the Q&A, I'm not gonna cover it now, but some of my favorite stuff there, including MitoZen, Super Sandman, and some of the supplements also for sleep. I suffer from very severe sleep apnea, where I stop breathing 250 times a night. And so for 5 years, I slept 90 minutes a night while I was traveling the globe, doing everything that I was doing. So I really lean into this. I've gotten a lot of help from coaches, including some in this room also as well. And then finally just reports. You know, they're incredible here in terms of diagnostic, but I think it's very important. I think part of the path we're on is self-awareness is a superpower. You know what I think, I think the journey we're on here, and then I'm gonna pass this on, is have the curiosity to know yourself. You know, that's self-awareness, and part of the understanding of getting to know ourselves is through meditation or journaling or talk therapy, or just so we can go inside, because, you know, I think it's just fascinating. If you want to improve your self-esteem overnight, just study the human body, study your brain. I mean, it's so amazing. And part of it is just getting to know ourselves, and part of it could be through diagnostic. But the other part is once you have the curiosity to know yourself, so many people do that, but then have the courage to be yourself. Is that fair? So many people know, I spend so much time with seniors. I lost my grandmother. My parents immigrated here and had many jobs. We lived in the back of a laundromat that my mom worked at. And it's not a sob story, so everyone has their own stories. But I was raised by my grandmother, who didn't speak the language. But when I was going through my learning challenges at 5, 6, 7, she passed of Alzheimer's. And have the person in your life, your hero, you know, just deteriorate in that way, it puts you on a path. And it's hard, I'm sure some of you have experience with this, right? So I don't get a little misty and stuff, but she was my hero. And so I spent a lot of time with seniors, not only helping polish their memories, but I learn a lot. And I hear also a lot of regret. And I just have to say, like, the regret always is they compromised their own happiness, or they weren't expressing who they truly are. They didn't pursue a relationship because what other people would think. They pursued a job because they're expected of them, whatever it happens to be. And I'm just saying that when we're taking our final breaths, none of other people's opinions and your own fears are going to matter. What's going to matter is how we lived, how we learned, how we loved, you know, how we laughed, those things. The most important thing is to keep the most important thing, right? And the life we live are the lessons we teach everyone else around us, you know, and so that's it. I'm going to pass this on to Dr. John. Thank you very much. We'll see you in the Q&A.
We're going to take a 5-minute break for everyone, and as a reminder, if you have any questions, like if everything came up for you during that and you wrote a million notes and you want to put them in the question jar right there, you can. And yeah, take a little bathroom break, tag us on Instagram, you're Out of Box Doc and Jim Kwik, and let's keep this going. Thank you guys. you can just take a seat. Is it on? Okay. I was like, I can hear. All right, everyone, we're going to get settled back into our seats if you wouldn't mind. Thank you so, so much. Is everyone having a good time? Yeah, this is amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Jim Kwik. That was awesome. So much incredible knowledge that you shared with us. We're going to bring Dr. John Lieurance onto the stage in just a moment. As a reminder, if you want to add any questions to our boxes, you're welcome to do so. And make sure that you're following your out-of-box stock on Instagram, Jim Kwik on Instagram. We are live streaming this on YouTube as well. So just thank you so much for being here. And without further ado, I'm going to bring Dr. John Lieurance onto the stage.
Cool, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. Okay, all right, great. All right, well that was awesome. Thanks for that presentation, Jim. And I'm going to be talking about how to better fuel the brain and some headwinds that are easy to address so that the brain can function with more vitality and robustness. So before I start, I'd just like to kind of share my own story. I had some challenges growing up. How many people have seen some of the commercials on TV with the attorneys looking for people that lived in Camp Lejeune? With that talk, so basically it was the worst water exposure. And I was in utero, and my first 2 years of life was in Camp Lejeune. There's 4 in my family, and everybody's got some significant illness. In fact, my dad has cancer. So growing up, I had some, I just always had challenges, really sensitive with foods, and I've always felt tired and kind of had brain fog. And then at a very young age, we moved to Hawaii, and my father was in the Marines. And we moved out there, and I got into skateboarding, and I remember one time I fell on my skateboard as a young child, and I went blind for like almost a day. And so I had some head traumas, and then eventually started to develop some learning disabilities, and I was 4 years behind in school. And in Hawaii, they don't really have like a middle schooling, right? It's either like you're in regular classes, or you're in special education classes that are very extreme. And so I found myself in special education classes in Hawaii, surrounded by some people that really needed to be there. And I didn't really need to be there, and it was something that happened, and I was there for 4 years. And when you're in that situation, you really start to believe things that maybe aren't true, and you get some mindsets that Jim talks a lot about how our mindset can really change how we learn. And when we don't believe that we can learn, and we believe that we have a broken brain, then we do, right? So whether you're right or you're wrong, you're true. It's true either way. So this was, so Jim and I share that same kind of story. And after we were introduced, we were speaking on the phone, and I was telling him my story. And Jim was like, well, wait a minute, because I hadn't really followed Jim before, and he had reached out to me for some, he was enjoying my products, and so we were talking about some of the products, and we just started to connect as friends. And so immediately when I shared my story, he lit up, and he's like, well, I have kind of the same story. A lot of people have heard that with his traumatic brain injury growing up. And so both of us share this challenge that is this pain to purpose, right? And so we had this challenge that we overcame, and we're here sharing what we learned from that experience to contribute and help other people. And we all have our own pain to purpose story, right? And so we're all handed challenges, and we can meet those challenges and overcome them, or we can not, right? And so it feels good. So we're going to get into vitality and life force in the brain. So what's the primary headwind to life force in the brain? Anybody have a guess? Stress. Okay, so what's the common thing all stresses have, right? Is inflammation. That's the one commonality. We're going to dive into what inflammation looks like at a cellular level. So not all stress is bad. In fact, we have this kind of what's called a hormetic window. So there's a certain amount of stress that gives us a net gain in health. Gravity is an example, right? Without gravity, our bones don't grow, our muscles don't work. There's a certain level of infection actually helps us because it activates our immune system. You know, keeping kids from out there playing and getting muddy isn't so good because their immune system doesn't develop, right? And so a certain level of stress, but we have a certain threshold of stress that we can tolerate before we shut down, and there's something called the cellular danger response, and we'll get into that a little bit. So the cellular danger response is basically when the stress exceeds the cell or the body's ability to adapt. So this adaptation response is based on the strength of the cell. And so what gives the cell strength is mitochondria. And the reason that this is such a big deal is because cellular energy, the brain requires so much energy, in fact, more than any other part of the body. And so when we start to run low on our fuel and our ability to make energy from glucose and oxygen, which is what the mitochondria does, then the brain's going to show that effect first. Secondly, you're going to start showing it in the heart. So the brain is the most what's called metabolically sensitive. So if we can bring up our overall life force, then we'll actually see the brain begin to show some benefit first. So, so what are some of the goals to improve mitochondrial function? So we understand this mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. By a raise of hand, how many people here have heard of the mitochondria? I think just about everybody. Okay, yeah. I mean, it's pretty ubiquitous that everybody understands that. So this is you know, the amount of mitochondria per cell really matters the amount of energy that the cell actually needs. And there's actually some cells in the brain that have up to 2 million mitochondria. And that's in the substantia nigra, right? That's the area that goes south with Parkinson's. That's an area we really want to take care of. I mean, they're saying like 10% of the population is getting Parkinson's now. So a lot of the common cells in the heart may have 4,000 or 5,000 mitochondria. So the mitochondria are constantly making new mitochondria, and we're breaking old ones down and recycling them. So there's like this turnover. And that really matters, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So the main thing that shuts down mitochondria is inflammation or stress. So stress is, whether it's a sunburn on the skin, or it's a bug that you catch, or a mosquito bite, or you stub your toe, or a thorn, right? There's inflammation there. And so what happens is that the mitochondria really doesn't like inflammation at all, and it shuts down. And so the cytokines associated with inflammation affect the mitochondria, where the mitochondria has a threshold where it's going to shut down. And that threshold is going to be dependent on melatonin, which is really interesting because I wrote a book on melatonin, and I didn't really realize that I was going to be digging so deeply into this window into health and vitality, and that melatonin was literally sitting right in the middle of this secret. Some other really interesting and important things to look at are different nutrients, which we're going to talk about, sleep rhythms. There's peptides and nootropics, and those can be really important to help enhance the brain. And then activating the brain, and I think Jim did a really good job at talking about ways to activate the brain in fun ways. And he has such a fun and exciting, and his sense of humor. So he's such a great speaker, so it's very inspiring to watch him up here. So the vitality of the brain, we've kind of already addressed a lot of this, but the goal would be that we have more calm energy, right? We have more stamina, we have better memory, that we're able to be more creative and then happier. So one of the things that happens across the board when our brain and our mitochondria level starts to decline is that we get emotional disturbances. And that's called the limbic nervous system, right? So the limbic, when you go limbic, it means there's an emotional aspect to it. And sometimes some of these limbic reactions aren't so great, right? We don't feel so good. So it's one thing to be able to really tap into that limbic or that emotional state and tie it into memory, because then you can really lock that into long-term memory. But it's another thing if we're slipping into a lot of dark thoughts and a lot of negative emotions, which is what happens often when people have like TBIs, you know, or people just in general have a lot of chronic inflammation in their brain. So we're going to talk a little about one of my favorite biohacks, which is photobiomodulation, using light. And so how we can use light to improve the mitochondria, that's really what I want to talk about, and things that you guys can do at home. So what happens when, so basically there's photons, which lasers have photons, the sun showers the planet with photons. There's different light emitting devices, which we're going to talk about, that emit photons, and those photons hit our skin, and then they can be absorbed at different depths into our body, and then our body can use those photons to make energy. And our body can use electrons as well. Electrons is physical matter, photons is non-matter, it's just energy. It's very interesting because you kind of have the fusion between matter and no matter, right? So there's almost some spiritual conversations that one can have when you start to delve into this science. And so what do the photons do to the body? One of the things is it improves circulation through nitric oxide. There's something called NF-kappa B, which really is a signaling factor which helps our overall ability to buffer oxidative stress. And this is really important for the mitochondria because this is what inflammation carries, is this oxidative stress, and this wears the cell down. It wears down our ability to make energy, because we talked earlier about this switch, this cell danger response. Otto Warburg was a German scientist in the 1940s. He won the Nobel Prize, and Hitler didn't let him go accept it, right? But this guy actually did something pretty amazing. He discovered really what cancer cells do, and he was able to show that when there's a certain level of stress, which the end of all like severe stresses is that the cell turns into cancer. Okay, cancer's not like a cold that you get. Cancer's something that generally works and develops over 20 years, right? This is, the body's trying to resist the stress for so long that eventually it just says, I'm done, I can't do it anymore. And cancer is a mitochondrial problem. And what happens is the cell danger response is also called the Warburg effect, based in honor of Dr. Warburg. And what that means is that the mitochondria shuts down. It says, I'm no longer going to work in this environment. It's like you have somebody that goes to work and the desk is messy, right? And it's like it smells bad and it's hot, and you know the environment's like, I'm not going to work here. I'm out of here. I'm leaving, right? That's exactly what the mitochondria does. It says, I can't work here. So it shuts down. The energy then has to be made outside of the mitochondria, and they call that anaerobic glycolysis versus aerobic glycolysis, or fermentation. That's how cancer cells make energy, and it's only 10% the amount of energy that you would make if you were able to make it through the mitochondria. So all of a sudden, now you're running at 10%. And so imagine if you were to have an infection like COVID, right? Or any type of a significant infection, and your body has immune cells that have that energy, right? They need energy to fight the battle, and then all of a sudden, 90% of their forces are lost, right? So this is the cytokine storm that leads to death with most infections. This is what happens. The Warburg effect, the cell danger response, but it's happening all the time. And we have so many stressors these days that we never had to experiment. I mean, this is a great experiment. So we live in an age and a day where there is a tremendous amount of headwinds that create inflammation in the body, and we need to start becoming more aware of it, and it's going to take more work to live and have that vitality that our parents and our grandparents had. So photons also stimulate the production of ATP and something called cyclic AMP, which this is a very anti-inflammatory process. And then there's the cytochrome C, which is, we're going to get into that a little bit. That's really interesting. But cyto is cell and chrome is light. So that's cytochrome C. We're going to talk about that a little later. So photobiomodulation, what does it do? It helps with circulation. And it activates that cytochrome C oxidase. So if you can imagine inside of the mitochondria, let me see, I think. If you can imagine in the mitochondria, you have 4 complexes. And the electrons go from one complex to the other. That's why they call it the electron transport chain. The mitochondria's job is to move electrons. In the process of moving the electrons, it creates heat, and the body harnesses that heat and makes something called ATP, and that's the fuel that runs everything, okay? So the last 4th step is that cytochrome C oxidase, and the laser actually works on that last complex, and it's even named after light, right? It's pretty cool. And so when we look at the different light spectrums, we look at, okay, what penetrates the deepest absorption, right? So we want light that absorbs deeper into the body, right? If we have light that just shines on the skin, it's not going to get into the blood, right? We want this to affect the body. We want the depth of penetration. And so that's where we start to look at some of these optical windows, and that's why it matters when we look at these different devices as to what's the best device for us to use at home, right? If we want to do photobiomodulation at home. And after this presentation, I think everyone here is going to be really interested in starting to do photobiomodulation. So this is going to be important. And so SaunaSpace makes a incandescent lamp, right? And then we have these, a lot of these at the clinic. This is how I like to do my sauna. These lamps put out 42% near infrared. And the near infrared is in this therapeutic window right here, okay? So it has a very, very deep depth. So these, we have these panels too. In fact, we have a closet to have these, and our company sells some of these panels, and they're great, right? They serve a great purpose, but the depth of penetration really isn't there, really, where these incandescent lamps that we don't sell, but my friend Brian Richards from SaunaSpace, they're excellent products. They actually go really deep. When you go, they have these little saunas that he makes, and you sit in there and like you immediately start just pouring sweat. I mean, you can just feel the heat, and it's going deep, like literally to the bone, because the sun puts out 52% near infrared. So what you want is near infrared, so that light can get into those mitochondria in the maximum amount of tissue and stimulate that mitochondrial effect. So other types of light therapy are transcranial, right? So this is Juliana Pena. She was the UFC champion fighter. She's really a very tough woman. And so these lights can be placed over the head, and you can literally penetrate through the skull and get some of these photons into the brain, and there's some really amazing studies. This is one study showing that there was an increase in perfusion and connectivity within something called the default mode network, and that it improved Alzheimer's patients. So what they were doing is basically they were having people that were suffering from degenerative neurologic disorder, and they were giving them doses of light on the head, and they were noticing some very exciting effects, right? And these are things that we can do, a lot of you can do at home. We do this with our patients here at the clinic, but there's devices. The Vi-Light is really interesting. I think I have a picture of that. But these are other studies on like Parkinson's and depression and anxiety. and that the light can pace the brain and create different like alpha and beta and gamma brain waves, so it can actually affect the way the brain is functioning. And then there's intranasal laser. So this has been something I've really been enjoying playing around with in one of my favorite biohacks. This is a class 4 laser that I'm using, and I'm using this on a patient here after I've done the endonasal balloon treatment that I do, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And there's other devices, like this is the Vilite that I was mentioning, so this is transcranial, and you have intranasal. And so what happens intranasally is that you have all of these superficial blood vessels. And when the light shines in the nose, you don't have as much skin that's going to block the light. You see, our skin is designed to protect us from the sun. So when we go out in the sun, we're protected from all of those rays. It doesn't injure us, right? But there's certain aspects of the sun that we want to get into our body, but those are blocked as well. So if we can get through the skin into the body, then we can have some really interesting effects. So by going through the nose, we're actually showering these photons onto our red blood cells, into our white blood cells, and different components of our blood. And that changes the blood in a very positive way that then circulates around the body and does some really, really cool things, including upregulating mitochondrial function and oxygen delivery and a number of different signaling aspects that are very, very healthy. And then intraoral. Oh, also one thing about the intranasal is that you can actually affect your frontal lobe through here. So it can actually go through, and there's been some studies that you can have an effect on the brain through that route. Through the mouth, you can actually affect the brain stem, yeah? So including the pons, and also, if you're coming down with something, there's ways that you can kind of shower this on your throat, and you can feel a lot better, like if you're feel like you're coming down with a cold. So I'm sharing some things with you that I don't necessarily have tools that you can go home and use. Some of these things are just really exciting things that I'm playing around with, just to demonstrate so much utility with this photobiomodulation. But I think eventually we're going to have some things, and I think technology, and so keep your eyes out for different technologies that pop up that you can do some of these things with. So in the clinic now, we have some really interesting and advanced treatments that we do. This is Luke's story. He's a podcaster. And so this is methylene blue, and we're photoactivating the methylene blue outside of the body. And then this is actually a green light. So we use a form of laser therapy. So this is photobiomodulation directly into the body, where we can actually shower various colors of laser on directly to the blood. And so we'll do that often after we do an IV of a different substance, because there's different substances that will react to different nutrients. Methylene blue happens to really match very well with red light in the spectrum, particularly best around 660, which a lot of these lights that we talked about from sauna space out in the sun, and also a lot of these panels, they're all around the 660 range, which means that we're going to get into methylene blue. I might be getting a little ahead of myself. And this is my buddy Doyle Bramhall getting blasted by the red light after an IV. There's vaginal and rectal. So this is the Mito wand. We're working with some interesting applications with this. This is commercially available. We actually sell this, and so it can be good for the vagina, for vaginal wall atrophy, or if there's infection. And also something that we're really interested in investigating a little bit more is through prostate. So taking different photodynamic substances through suppository or orally, and then administering this light for things like prostate cancer or hypertrophy of the prostate. So now I want to switch gears a little bit to talk about the inner ear. You know, the inner ear is just one of those areas of the body that's considered to be like kind of untreatable, right? So it's like, you know, there's really not anything, you know, you're going to lose your hearing. You know, people get tinnitus, people get a lot of balance disorders. There's things that go wrong with the inner ear. I started working with a treatment called Lumamed, and this was an interview I did on ABC back in 2017, actually. And I was introduced to a German doctor, and he's in Baden-Baden, Germany, and he and his father had been using laser to the inner ear for like 30 years when I met him, and now it's 40. So we wound up learning this procedure, bringing it to the United States, and we've been doing it for the last 10 years where we do direct laser to the inner ear. Right in this spectrum, about 660, but it's not red light, it's literally laser, which is a little bit stronger. And so all of those benefits that we talked about early with photobiomodulation really help to enhance the nerves in the hair cells in the inner ear. And we had been seeing some tremendous results with hearing loss and tinnitus and balance disorders just using the laser. So we started to work more with that. So this is the laser. You know, it's some of the effects that we talked about earlier. I can skip that, but this is what the laser looks like. And this is a patient getting laser to the ear. And it was a series of laser treatments to the inner ear. And the reason that I think that this is so important, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this, is hearing is really important for the activation of the brain. And they've done studies that really correlate a tremendous amount of loss of cognitive function when we start to even have mild hearing loss. And part of it is, you know, the brain just thrives on information, right, and input and activation. And we start to diminish that, then the brain doesn't get activated, and we start to have that whole, if you don't use it, you lose it. You know, the Chinese proverb is the unused gate gets the rust, and that's what happens with the brain. So literally, you could be 2 times more likely to get dementia, right, if you have even mild hearing loss. So 50% of people at the age of 85 or older have hearing loss. So it's a big problem, right? So what if we could turn that around? What if we could like change that? Would that be a big deal? Well, I think I cracked the code to this, you know, because I had been working really hard with this laser, and I was exposed to a doctor in Korea that was doing some injections of stem cells into the inner ear. And I flew him out, and so what we've done is we've combined the stem cells with the laser. And we've also stacked on using some different photodynamic substances, and I've seen some really, really interesting results. So anybody that wants to take a little bit more of a dive into this, we call it Sunave. You can go to sunave.com. Of course, we do consultations regarding this if you want to get more information, but the website is fairly rich with information. And I can tell you that some of the results that we're seeing right now definitely defy what they believe is possible in medicine. And then one of the treatments that we did on Jim was we used a stem cell treatment where we were able to actually home these stem cells into very specific parts of the brain. So when Jim came in, you know, he had had a traumatic brain injury, and he'd been to a lot of different specialists, but you know, there was some things that I was able to pick up that he hadn't really had anybody like set their eyes on and see the same way I saw. So I was able to identify some parts of his brain that weren't functioning. There was some balance of right and left, and there was a specific test where we're testing his eyes, and I could really identify that he really needed certain parts of his brain to be more supported. And so what we did is we took very small embryonic-like stem cells, or V cells. They're in your blood, and there's proteins that hold these stem cells from working, so they're kind of bound. And so there's a laser, it's this laser here that we use, and this laser is set very, very specifically, and it's a very specific laser, and it relaxes those proteins and it liberates all of these billions of these tiny little stem cells that are considered pluripotent, which means they can turn into anything and they can go anywhere because they're tiny. So they may be the holy grail of healing, and it's probably one of the more exciting areas in stem cells that I've seen for a while, and we've been involved with it for a long time. I think 15 years ago we were doing liposuctions and bone marrow, and before that we were using other types of regenerative treatments like PRP, so we've been in it for a long, long time. And I'm extremely excited about this particular type of stem cell therapy, and what's really neat about it is that you can do a blood draw, liberate those V cells, IV them, and then we can home them into very specific parts of the body. So that this is part of what we're doing with the inner ear with the V cell, and including not just the inner ear, but we're homing them into certain parts of the brain that are responsible for hearing. So it's a fairly elaborate procedure. But I think for the benefit for people that have had traumatic brain injuries or they're dealing with different types of neurological problems, combining being able to specifically target them to certain parts of the brain, but also getting people to activate their brain in unique ways that activate those areas, and then giving the fuel to drive those nerves, I mean, that's about as good as you can get, I think. And so that's what we're hoping to accomplish with a lot of our procedures here. And then this is the treatment that we're doing on Jim. That's Ben Greenfield when he was in town. He also has a great sense of humor. So, so now there's different colors of light, right? So like red really works on increasing energy. So that red is really good for the mitochondria. When you start getting into like green lights, then it's really good for pain and inflammation. And it also really upregulates oxygen absorption. So Alan is here, and Alan has developed a device called a CVAC. How many people have seen that pod that we have in our clinic? It's like this egg-shaped. Well, this is Alan's company, and he's actually flown all the way out here to be here at the show with us, and or the event. So, but this is one of my favorite devices, right? And so you sit in there, and it changes the pressure. So you can imagine if you were to use a color like green and then go into this pod. So things that you can kind of combine and mix with oxygen therapies. Ozone is another oxygen treatment that we use that's very, very good for mitochondrial function. I'm not talking a lot about that tonight because there's so much to talk about, but ozone is definitely something to look at for brain force, right? So ozone can be really important to activate that turnover where you're producing more fresh mitochondria and cleaning out the old ones. In particular, it's probably one of my favorite, along with fasting. Unfortunately, you know, we have like an hour. I have an hour to talk, and so like there's so much I want to bring to you, and I want to talk to you about. So I'm trying to distill down just what I'm able to. Blue is really good for circulation, wound healing, antibacterial, anti-inflammatory. It also helps with telomeres, which is helpful for anti-aging. And then yellow enhances vitamin D and serotonin. It can be very antiviral, yellow. So riboflavin is something that I thought riboflavin was going to get a lot more attention when COVID first hit, because I had a German friend that had done some research where he was injecting riboflavin, and then he was doing the blue light, and also curcumin works really well with green light as well. So like he was seeing some rapid turnaround. Shortly after, I started to use methylene blue along with red light, and was seeing some pretty interesting results in that area as well. So different photosensitizers are like quercetin and sterile stilbene from blueberries, fisetin from strawberries, riboflavin, curcumin, green tea extract, St. John's wort, chlorophyll, chlorella, and spirulina. Methylene blue is really my favorite. I think it's the most powerful. But these are all things that you can take, right? You can take these things orally, and you know you can go out in the sun, or you can get a device at home, and you can have some very, very powerful effects on your mitochondria and your brain force. But if you really want to see some exciting things, the methylene blue, which is what we're going to talk about, they call it the magic bullet. So how many people, show of hands, have heard the word magic bullet? Right? I mean, we all have. That was coined by Paul Ehrlich in the 1800s, and he was referring to a substance that had far-reaching benefits to the body, these tremendous healing abilities, but yet left the body completely unharmed. He was referring to methylene blue. And the patent ran out on it, but it was the cure for malaria. It was the standard of care for malaria. It was, at one time, it was one of the best treatments for chronic urinary tract infections, because when you take it, one thing that you'll notice is that you're going to pee blue. And I had a lot of fun with this when I was in the snow over Christmas, right? I'm like, you know, wow, that's really cool, right? So, but yeah, so it clears through the kidneys and through your urine, and so it's antimicrobial. And it works on the mitochondria. So out of 150,000 different synthetic molecules, because I'm not, you know, I'm a pretty holistic guy, right? I mean, I'm a naturopath and a chiropractic neurologist. I mean, I'm all about like natural, right? Methylene blue is an exception in my mind. You think about all of the massive amounts of things that were discovered, nothing even comes close to what methylene blue does. Methylene blue has an affinity to the mitochondria. In fact, that's why they like to use it to stain brain tissue when they dissect it. And initially, that's what it was. It was a stain for tissues. And it had an affinity for the mitochondria, so it seeks out the mitochondria, it gets in there, and it acts as both a pro-oxidant and an antioxidant. And it donates electrons independent of oxygen. So basically, what happens, the end result of taking methylene blue, is you have a 30% increase in your mitochondrial output. This is really exciting. I've shared this with so many people, and I mean, just people, the feedback pours in. People feel like they're younger, they have more energy, they have more mental clarity, they're stronger in the gym. So it's one of those things that if you can dial in your dosage, you know, if you can get it right, you should feel it. Another really great benefit of methylene blue, if what I told you isn't enough, they've done huge clinical trials on depression. The mood uplifting aspect of methylene blue is incredible. Like, you just feel good, you feel happy. And that's partly because when you have a healthy, strong brain, guess what happens? You feel good, you feel happy, you want to be nice. You want to like connect with other people. You know, this is why we want to do this work. Most of you all know that I'm the scientific advisor for mitozen.com, and so at Mitozen we make a lot of products with unique delivery methods. Like, we make suppositories and liposomals, and we have some mists, and there's a couple of products that we make that have some of these photosensitizers. So one thing to kind of keep in mind is a lot of the really good ones don't absorb very well orally. They just don't. Like curcumin really doesn't absorb well. So we've put a number of these in suppositories and liposomal deliveries, which do absorb a lot better, particularly the suppositories. So we're going to talk a little bit more about suppositories later. So now we're going to kind of dive into melatonin. We already talked a little bit about it, but melatonin, the ultimate sleep, stress resilient molecule, so it helps us to resist stress. And look at the decline of melatonin as we get older. Look at by 40. Is that crazy? So there's no way we can biohack that, right? You can, there's a lot of things that you may or may not heard about protecting your circadian rhythm, wearing the glasses, protecting your eyes from like certain lights, and keeping your ability to like regulate that sleep-wake cycle so that you have a strong release of melatonin. But you do all of that, you're still gonna be way down here, especially as you get, you know, into these years. So supplementing with melatonin really makes a lot of sense, especially because we have all the stresses, you know. I would say taking melatonin has probably been one of the most impactful things I've ever done in my life, besides the methylene blue. Those two molecules, and that's why I've written a book on both of those. One of the other books, which we hadn't talked about, is Magic Bullet, which is you can find that at methylenebluebook.com. But, you know, so one of the really cool things about methylene blue too is you don't have a negative feedback loop. And there's so many people out there talking negatively about melatonin. You got to be careful. It's dangerous. They have no idea, right? So Russell Ryder is the foremost authority on melatonin. He's on all the research, and he takes 100 to 200 milligrams every night, right? So, you know, to me, it's like this guy's the most knowledgeable. You don't have a negative feedback loop, so your body's not going to shut down its own production, and there's no toxicity to melatonin. They've done studies where it would be up like 150,000 milligrams of melatonin, and they stopped the study. It would be like an adult taking that. So you can take much higher doses. So when you start looking at sleep, you might not be needing to look at taking hundreds of milligrams, but when you start looking at buffering the body from the stresses that we're dealing with, and some people might be dealing with some sort of disease processes in the body, and they may want to look at things like high-dose melatonin as an alternative. And I would just, the caveat here is that this is not medical advice. I am just simply giving, this is for entertainment, right? You should work with a healthcare practitioner, okay? I was just told I got 10 minutes. I got so much more to talk about. Okay. All right, we're maybe going to skip a little bit. So we already kind of got that. So melatonin's only 2.5% absorbed orally. That's not much, right? And so that's why we look at suppositories. And so the rectal delivery of nutrients bypasses the first pass of the liver, which destroys a lot of nutrients, and then all the enzymes, right? So we just don't get the nutrients and a lot of people don't have healthy guts, you know, so they're not really absorbing a lot of the things that they want to. So taking care of your doorways. So this is something that I really wanted to share with you guys tonight, is this idea of inflammation being the headwind, right? So what are the 3 doorways that could allow inflammation into the body? The primary doorways: nasal passage, the mouth, and the colon. And so this is how it works, is we have an imbalance with the flora. We have infection. We have stuff that lives there, and they outgas something called endotoxins. They also call them lipopolysaccharides. The sinus. And these biofilms that set up shop in these areas, they're very sticky, and they hold these bacteria, and the bacteria sit in these biofilm, and they just live there, and they just secrete these toxins. And that's why when they look at the oral health and they look at dysbiosis in the gut, there's all these diseases associated with them: autoimmune diseases, cancers, I mean, you name it. If you do some research, you'll actually be really surprised that they've discovered that that virtually, you know, all diseases could be caused by some of these situations in the mouth, the colon, and a lot of people aren't talking about the sinuses and the nasal passage. Unfortunately, this is a very underlooked area, and so this is something that we pay a lot of attention to in our clinic. New patient comes in, this is a big priority. We're testing, we're doing swabs, we're finding people have some nasty infections, like antibiotic resistant strains that are nasty and really hard to get rid of. And when we get rid of them, guess what? People feel so much better. Now, you ask a cocaine user, what's the quickest route to their brain? So these endotoxins going straight to the brain, do you know there is a massive amount of evidence showing degenerative neurologic disease and brain fog having a relationship to nasal health. and different infections that set themselves. So it's an easy fix. We have to start looking at hygiene. We have to look at things that are simple that we can do. And I call it the Ganesh protocol. So it's taking care of your doorways, right? And so we have a few products that we make, but there's things that you can do on your own, like essential oils, like antimicrobial essential oils in your mouth. There's oil pulling. We have a product called glutastat, but you can use a colloidal silver. You know, you can do neti pot. There's iodine can be really good in a neti pot. There's a yogurt recipe. In fact, if you're live streaming or if anybody's here and they're really interested in this ProBioZen yogurt, really into like fermenting my own yogurt. You want to talk about feeling good and having a really healthy gut, and it's super easy. I know it sounds like, oh my gosh, I'm going to ferment yogurt. That sounds hard. It's really easy. And we have a sheet, and you can talk to Tara if you're here. She will make sure that you get hooked up with this recipe. And I like the coconut. I'm not a big fan of dairy. So ProBioZen yogurt, this is the Ganesh kit. You can talk to Sarah about it. Breathing through the nose. Functional cranial release. This is the endonasal treatment that Jim was talking about. So I had the pleasure of working with Dana White. He's the CEO of UFC. I've worked with a lot of fighters. This is Joe Mercola. This is Frank Schallenberger. Those names may or may not mean anything to you. These are some fighters. This is Cowboy Sharon. This is me at the Performance Institute in Vegas. So when we breathe through our nose, there's some really interesting things that happen that keep us healthy. And the respiratory rate actually paces something called limbic oscillation. So when Jim was talking about tying emotion to memory, I was really thinking, man, so people really need to have that breath in the higher areas of their nose. And so there's this black or white. Okay, you're a mouth breather, you're not breathing through your nose, or you are. But there's this whole gray area, right? And so Weston Price, he's considered the father of the raw food movement. And he traveled the world, and he was able to show that Aborigines have these wide skulls. They keep all their teeth. They don't have to have wisdom teeth removed. And they don't have a lot of the diseases associated with modern civilization. So there's a collapse to the skull. And you look at a lot of these pictures of these Aborigines, and there's even twins that, you know, one twin stayed in the Aborigine tribe and the other one went and lived off. And the one that lived in the industrial and that was eating refined foods, their face collapsed in and the teeth were all crowded. It's not a normal situation, people. Like, this is a reflection of us disconnecting from the earth and from the way that we're supposed to be living. And so this collapse of the skull is basically happening to all of us. And so there's a treatment for it. So there's a connective tissue layer that goes around the brain and spinal cord, and it's called the dura mater. And in Latin, that means tough mother. So, you know, a lot of we probably have some tough mothers in the audience right now, right? We want to protect those kids, right? We want to keep them safe. But sometimes we're a little bit overly protective, aren't we? And what happens is the kid doesn't get out to play, doesn't learn some of the lessons he needs to learn. And this happens with the brain too. The tough mother that protects the brain sometimes gets these adhesions. It gets tough, it gets locked up, and it holds something called the cranial rhythm from happening, that full expression of movement. We have in the brain something called the glymphatic system. You know, the lymphatic system in the body? So this is what is our gutter system. We remove waste, and that removing waste makes room for nutrients to come in. And the glymphatic system is primarily activated by deep sleep. And that glymphatic system is tied to a lot of brain situations. You know, a lot of proteins accumulate in the brain because we're not clearing those proteins. Like beta amyloid is what's primarily linked to Alzheimer's, right? Alpha-synuclein to Parkinson's. Tau protein in general is for traumatic brain injury. These football players hit their head, right? Then they're not sleeping, they're not getting deep sleep, the glymphatic system. But nobody's talking about the cranial structure, and if it's all locked in and you try to stimulate that glymphatic system but things don't move, that can be a real problem. Here's more pictures. Cranial rhythm. And then this is really interesting. This was a test showing before manipulation, and then look at what happens after. So there is a real movement that happens with all of our skulls, and when it's jammed up, it really affects brain force. So that's really all I wanted. And you know, I wrote a book on endonasal. It was very challenging. It was like, you know, something that I was like asking, like, why am I doing this? You know, because I have a really busy practice already. I wasn't looking to release a book to attract a bunch of people to come in and do endonasal with me. I'm really looking to teach other doctors because it's such a gift. This is one of the most exciting physical adjustments I'd ever found. And I love doing it for people to see all these exciting results and combining it with the different activation that I use with the brain. You know, all the things that we talked about with the V cell, and those all do really well when you get a brain that has fuel delivery, when you have a cranial rhythm, when you have the oxygen moving through the nasal passage properly, you have that circulation of oxygen. It really matters. So we talked about this. We do have coaching plans, and we do work with patients remotely. So you don't necessarily have to be here in Sarasota for us to work with you. You can reach out to us regarding that. We work with patients with hormones, and we also have some really exciting, I didn't get a chance to really get into peptides, but this is something that we do a lot with. Peptides are really exciting, and there's some really amazing things that can be done to enhance vitality and enhance mitochondrial and brain energy with peptides. So we have peptide coaching plans as well. And some of the IV protocols that we talked about tonight, the inner ear and the V cell and some of the cranial release, all of these things are things that a lot of people, they fly in, they travel here for. And those are all things that you can reach out to Tara regarding consults with. I did it. Thank you. So we're gonna take a short break, a 5-minute break, and then Jim and I are gonna get up here and we're gonna do a Q&A, and we're gonna go until whatever time we're supposed to finish, and so you guys can do a little bathroom break. Thank you.
There's something wrong with that. And then it just reflects.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah? Okay. It's gonna be fun. Hi everyone, we're gonna get started. Thank you. Thank you.
Is your mic turned on?
My mic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we are getting into the question and answer portion of tonight. A lot of you submitted some really interesting questions. I know many of us are going to benefit from the answers of this evening. So this is a start for both of you. I'd like for both of you to answer this one. If I have a strong passion for biohacking, what would you suggest as a small, simple step to get started?
Please.
You want me to go? Okay. Breath work. I think breath work out in the sun, because you're going to get some photobiomodulation. And I would recommend Wim Hof's app. It's super easy, and there's some guided breaths that you can do. And basically, it's a series of deep inhale and exhale. And it really helps to regulate the autonomic nervous system. You know, because if you think about breath, it's like one of those things that we have both volitional and non-volitional control over.
I'll turn the phone.
Yeah. We have both volitional and non-volitional control over. Volitional and non-volitional control.
One more time.
And so we have the autonomic nervous system that regulates breath, and then we can actually do it with our brain. Yeah, so it's like this window into controlling that autonomic nervous system, which is so important. And this is the part of the nervous system that really suffers, particularly the parasympathetic side. So the autonomic is kind of separated between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, the fight or flight and the resting and digesting. And so we all have too much strength in the sympathetic and not enough in the parasympathetic. And we recorded a podcast earlier, and we were kind of getting into the idea of, you know, cortisol is what activates that stress response, and it's that fight or flight response. But at the same time, melatonin is the primary hormone that activates that parasympathetic nervous system. So if we could, 3-4 times a week, wake up in the morning and do a series of breath works, you would feel such an amazing benefit. And it's free, right? Well, the app is $30-something.
But our breath is right here.
Yeah.
Jim?
Yeah, I would second that. I would say a small, simple step. We have about 60,000 thoughts a day. A lot of those thoughts come in the form of questions that we ask ourselves, and that question, it hijacks and enables a part of your brain called the reticular activating system that shines a spotlight on the world because at any given time there are a billion things you can focus on. And I think our focus determines our reality and our behaviors and our feelings. And so I talk about something in the podcast and in the book called our dominant question, that there's a question we ask more than any other question, and that determines a big part of our life. So if you're always asking why me, or how come I can never X, whatever, you get those answers. A good dominant question that would help you to biohack and do everything better in life would just be, is this good for my brain or bad for my brain? So that would always come up. Like if you start training yourself to ask that question, you put it on your phone, you put it on Post-it notes or whatever, after a while you kind of get obsessed about it. And then it kind of guides you and provides you a path forward with everything. Because, there's a quote in my book that says life is the C between B and D, where B stands for birth, D stands for death, life C, choice. And I believe that these difficult times could diminish us, these difficult times can distract us, or these difficult times can develop us. But we decide, and I think we have to start really owning our own thoughts, and especially the questions that we ask. So like what you're eating, what you're watching, who you're spending time with, is this good for my brain or bad for my brain? And I think the behaviors take care of itself. Small, simple step.
Awesome, thank you. So this one's for Dr. John. You spoke a lot about methylene blue, but this is a very specific question. So what happens if someone's on an SSRI? Should they be taking methylene blue? What precautions? How does it work?
Yeah, it's a really common question. There was an incident where there was some individuals that were receiving a surgery for called a thymectomy. So the thymus gland is a very metabolically active gland. We talked about it earlier. So there's a lot of mitochondria in there. So what they would do is give people these large infusions of methylene blue, and this gland would show up very dark blue so that they could dissect it, right? And so they found that during the surgery, there was the patients that were on SSRIs actually didn't do so well. They died. But the amount of methylene blue was much higher than what we would recommend. And so the Mayo Clinic retracted that warning, and the entire country of Canada retracted that warning, meaning that they retracted the warning of SSRIs with methylene blue. But the FDA has not. I'm kind of curious that they didn't, but I don't see that as, and again, this isn't medical advice, right? You have to be following the guidance of your healthcare professional, but basically this is the truth about where that came from.
It's really interesting. Thank you. Jim, what advice would you give someone when it comes to improving our ability to stop those distractions we have when using technology?
Yeah, I'm pro technology, in general. It's how we connected with many of you, right? It's a wonderful way to empower and educate, entertain. But I feel like all technology, it has its pros and cons. Like fire is technology. It could cook your food or it could burn down your home. It's just how it's employed. My challenge with the phones is that, I talk about 4 horsemen of the mental apocalypse, if you will, and how technology kind of drives it. It doesn't create it, but it definitely amplifies it. There's digital distraction, which is a challenge. Where every ring, ping, ding, app notification, social media alert, you're flexing your distraction muscles and you can't focus on your kids. You can't focus on a Zoom or a call. There's also digital dementia, which we talked about earlier. Like because your phone carries your phone numbers, you don't have to memorize it. It keeps your calendars, it keeps your to-dos, it does simple math for you, right? You pick it, so then we don't get the exercise here. It's incredibly convenient, but then also be crippling if we're just dependent on it. There's also a digital, I term digital deduction, because of all the algorithms that it has, and we don't have to think anymore. It just tells us, what to think, and that's a little bit of my, the challenges I have. And then the last one is digital deluge, which I just termed as the digital overwhelm. So much information. Like the human brain hasn't changed, any since, but for hundreds of thousands of years. But it's not like we have the world's information here, and like when it's like here, it's not, really set up and evolved to do that. Especially my pet peeve first thing in the morning and at night. Some people have trouble sleeping. It's just like you know how long it would take, people in the past to be to be exposed to that kind of information, like that you're just scrolling through thousands of posts and you're context switching. You're going from this to this to this to this, and it's incredibly exhausting. And so what I would say is control the controllables, right? And the best way of when you're designing a habit is you want to make the things that are good for you easy, and you want to make the things that are not good for you more difficult. You know, so I really challenge everyone not to touch their phone the first 30 minutes of the day, because when you wake up, you're in this kind of alpha, theta, relaxed brainwave state, you're extremely suggestible, right? And if the first thing you do is pick up your phone, you're rewiring your brain for two things that are hurting your productivity, your performance, and honestly, your peace of mind. Number one, distraction, right, which we already talked about. But number two, almost as hurtful, you're rewiring your brain for reaction. Meaning, how are you going to build a quality life, health, family, whatever it is you aspire for, if the first thing you do is just react to whatever email, voicemail, social media message, text message, or whatever, and you're on the defense, right? And you know, and you can get one message first thing in the morning, it can hijack your whole day, your whole mood. And you don't like to be proactive, and you wouldn't be here if you weren't. I would say that my friend Brendan Burchard, some of you know Motivation Manifesto, he says your inbox is nothing but a convenient organizational system for other people's agenda for your life, right? And it kind of makes sense. And I'm not saying that don't be on email and stuff. I'm just saying what I do first thing in the morning to control the controllables is before I touch my phone or anything, thought experiment. I fast forward to the end of the day, just like I did this morning, and I said, you know, I would if my family or friends or whatever called me up and says, "How was your day?" And I was like, "It was amazing. It was magical. We crushed it today." And then I say, "Okay, what had to happen in order for me to feel that way?" Right? You live a life based on design, where you're not reacting to things. And I just come up with 3 things at work and 3 things, you know, personally, that they don't have to be the biggest things in the world, but then that becomes my focus for the day. You know, it's a kind of a proactive way of stepping into like your life.
Yeah. Well, you already somewhat alluded to this with sleep and the importance, and this question is for both of you. What are your top 3 suggestions to improve the sleep? And it sounds like one of them is to not look at your phone right away. Let's go with you, Dr. John, first.
Well, I think that light exposure is the biggest thing. So red light is okay, but blue and green is the worst, right? So like the lights in your house that are in the ceiling are generally not good. And so the way that I've gotten around that is I get all these small lamps and I put a red light in it, and then I get a remote plug. So you can buy these like packs of like 6 remote plug outlets, right? And so you put those in the wall, and so then you have a master switch, so you walk into the room and you can basically turn on all the red lights, and you don't have to turn on the can lights in the ceiling. And so you can navigate your house and you've got red light. And if you do this for a week or 2, you'd be surprised, because then you go and turn the lights on and you're kind of used to that more relaxing light that you really can feel the contrast, and you don't want to go back. You won't want to go back. So light would be a really easy fix, you know, with what I suggested. I think that at some point it's really important to not eat too late, and also not do work too late, right? So both those are going to kind of get the system in more of your, because like if you're trying to get stuff done, like that's what cortisol does. It wakes you up, it gets you busy, you're focused on different things, you're getting things done, and you're looking to switch away from that and more of a parasympathetic, more like general, you know, focus. And so when you're continuing to be on your phone, that really does get a pointed focus. And then lastly, eating, and your digestive tract has to continue to work. A lot of studies show that really inhibits sleep.
Yeah. I mean, sleep is probably the number one thing you could do for your brain, right? If you have long-term memory issues, check your sleep and do a sleep study. That's where you consolidate short to long-term memory. You clean out the beta amyloid plaque, to clean the brain aging challenges, and you dream too. I think we underestimate. We'll spend like probably a third of our lives sleeping, right? So maybe 3 to 5 years dreaming in total. And so I like to explore and do things in my dreams because I get still restorative rest in my body, but I could also like, some of you familiar with lucid dreaming? For sleep, and we did a whole chapter of this in Limitless, and we've done 20 podcast episodes on this. I would say sunlight first thing in the morning, like the first 30 minutes, I know you get up before the sun comes up, but to get that sunlight to kind of reset your circadian rhythm is so important. And not expensive at all, just going outside. And it's not even, you can't be inside, even if you have windows, like the glass will filter out some of the spectrum of the light. So if you can, even if it's hazy outside, you'll still get the benefit. I would say also stay on a schedule. Your brain, even on weekends, I know this is in a perfect world. You don't have to do everything, but something makes a difference to make progress. Most people use an alarm to wake up. I think it's more important to have an alarm to go to sleep. And so staying on a schedule, building that rhythm. And then talk about temperature. How many of you use some kind of like, you lower the temperature in your bedroom, or you have a chili pad or an 8-sleep mattress pad? It's so very important. Because like, think about it, as hunter-gatherers, like we would know it's time to go to sleep because there'd be a drop in light and a drop in temperature, right? So it signals your nervous system to be able to kind of phase down. And I would say you could also take a hot bath, Epsom salt bath. The magnesium helps you to be able to relax. And then when you get out of the bath, your core body temperature is going to drop, and that would be a signal for you to be able to sleep. So you could have the blackout curtains. I mean, there's so many great things.
You could take 200 milligrams of melatonin.
Yeah, that's right. and I appreciate, like, I could stay at a hotel here. I'm staying at Dr. John's, and he has those lamps. I love that you have it all set up. I mean, I wouldn't get that, all the red lights, and it's, yeah. Some people use the glasses, like the blue vodka glasses. Yeah, this is fun. This is fun, right, guys? You're like my people, so this is like, I just love, it's just.
Well, we have another going for you, actually. So the question is, if you need the information and the emotion to create a memory, how do you remember the numbers if there isn't an emotion associated with that?
So the thing is like, what I realized after going on 31 years of doing this, and especially in the school system, it's not how smart somebody is, or how smart your significant other is, or how smart your kids are, or how smart you are. It's not how smart you are, it's how are you smart, right? It's not how smart you are, but how are you smart? And we all have, there are different modes of genius, if you will. And in school, take the SATs, right? There's mathematical and there's like verbal linguistic. But there's a real spectrum of ways to be smart. Musical intelligence, kinesthetic intelligence, interpersonal intelligence. There's so many different ways, right? But there's also different ways of learning. Some people prefer, how many of you prefer modality to learn just by reading? That's like the thing, that's how you could best study. Other people like to have a conversation with somebody and hear it, or listen to it on a podcast. Other people need to kind of roll up their sleeves and kind of get experimental and do it. So it all makes a difference. I have a video out there, I won't do it now, but to tell you to count in different languages, like Japanese, and you learn in a few minutes just by moving your body, right? You can see it, feel it. Actually, can I just do it? Stand up real quick. Just do what I do, say what I say, and just so you get the experience here in terms of how to add emotion to something that necessarily doesn't have emotion or see it. I'll go say this, and while you're doing it, ichi ni.
Ichi ni.
Okay, that's 1 and 2. Ichi is 1, ni is 2 in Japanese. Okay. San, so it sounds like sun to me. So just point to like a light, san. And then she, so point to a female in the room. She. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So ichi, ni, san, she. 5 is go. So like go like walk. Go. Feel it, like go. And if it makes you laugh, then you're gonna remember, right? You're moving your go. And then 6 is roku, like you're rowing a canoe. Roku. Okay, so let's do it. Ichi, ni, san, shi, ro, and roku. And then you have shichi, and it sounds to me like you're sitting. So go sit down again, and it's shichi, but it's ha. So get up, hachi. So sichi, and then get up is hachi. Okay, and then finally, 9 and 10. 9 is coo. What makes a cooing sound? Baby. So like this, coo. And I guess I missed my baby. No. Coo, and then 10 is Jew. So I just put on a jewel. It's like Jew. All right? So can you remember this? Ready? Ichi, ni, san, shi, go, roku, shichi, hachi, ku, and Jew. All right, great job, everyone.
Wow, that's amazing.
So I would say adding emotion is not always easy to do it, but the key is you want to make it visual, auditory, and then feeling, right? And those are the primary ways. Like you think about your senses. You can't necessarily always smell something or taste it, but information comes through your senses, right? And so if you could see it, say it, and hear it, you're more likely to remember it. With the numbers, I just could, and it would take more time to explain to you how to do it. But if I'm gonna go and do like, and you could test me, right? It's 3, 1, 6, 4, 1, 8, 2, 2, 5, 3, and so on. You could train yourself to be able to see. For me, I did it, there's something, I term it alphanumeric code. I didn't come up with this. Some people call it the major system. That there are 10, there are about 10 consonant sounds. Like certain sounds sound similar, like the C and the K, right? But if you group them together, about 10 consonant sounds, and they're also 10 digits. So I have a sound for every digit. So when you give me numbers, I could just create like a story or a sentence in my head, and I could just do that for hundreds of numbers. But the story adds something I could see, something I could hear, and also something I could feel with the story, and it makes it more tangible. If that makes sense.
Yeah, now we can all count to 10.
Yeah.
Pretty cool, thank you. Okay, Dr. John, for depression, would methylene blue work better than NAD or phosphocytoscholine IV?
Phosphatidylcholine IV, yeah. I think so, yes.
And?
Well, yeah, for sure. I would say that would have a higher probability to improve mood, for sure. But, you know, NAD is one of those things that doesn't always move the needle with everybody. But it is something that is depleted primarily with lack of sleep, alcohol, drugs. You know, stress in general depletes this vital nutrient NAD, and this conversion from NAD to NADH is like that ratio is very large. So as we get older, having birthdays depletes the NAD. We lose the ability to have this important nutrient to carry on that electron transport chain in the mitochondria. And so for some people, adding in NAD, they notice an improvement, and it can help with depression, right? Because you increase brain force, you get happier. But I've clinically haven't seen that change nearly as much as with methylene blue. Yeah, and phosphatidylcholine, that would be more of a memory thing, you know, because it's going to turn into choline, and it's going to be a good brain enhancer. It's also really good for detoxification.
Wow, thank you.
I did that IV today, right?
We did.
Yeah.
We did a phosphatidylcholine IV at the end of the day.
And blue, thank you.
This one's fun for both of you. Can you tell us your morning routines?
Yeah.
Jim, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I believe in the idea that first you create your habits, and then those habits create you, right? The challenge is when it comes to habits, universities say about 40% of our day is unconscious, you know? But so when do we actually sit down and design these things? I'm going to give you some of the things I do. It's not for everybody, and I don't think you have to do everything because it takes time, right? So, and you know, I don't have this idea of perfection. I just want to make some progress each day. When I wake up in the morning, I don't open my eyes. I remember my dreams. When you open your eyes, you tend to be distracted, but I do believe. Did you know that some of the most amazing works of art, literature, inventions came from dream states? Like Mary Shelley came up with Frankenstein in her dream. You know, Paul McCartney came up with the song Yesterday in his dream. You know, so many inventors, the sewing machine, everything came from people's dreams. The challenge is a lot of people have these incredible dreams, but they don't remember them, right? How, they forget it. And so I just have a process. You could search Jim Kwik, Remember Dreams, and I have 6 steps on how to remember dreams. But I do that. Now, by the way, like in morning, I know it's morning routine, but then before I go to bed, I also have like I put a message in my non-conscious mind. How many of you have, this is not tangential, how many of you have ever had to get up early for a flight or something like that, and you set the alarm, and you wake up like a minute or 2 before the alarm goes off? Isn't that incredible? You know how incredible that is. Like, that's how powerful, your mind is. Like, but what if you use tapped into that same potential and power to do other things, right? And so for me, I will actually, give myself a suggestion before I go to sleep so I could think about or work on something or have some kind of insight or idea. Because when you sleep, your brain, it's a myth that your brain shuts off at night. In some ways, it's actually even more active. And what is it doing? It's processing and integrating everything you did that day. That's why you tend to dream about those kind of things, but you could come up with some amazing. So I wake up, I remember my dreams, a few other things that I'll do. I told you about that thought experiment where I fast forward at the end of the day and I think about how do I win this day, and that becomes my focus. I make my bed. It's just, for me, I truly believe how you do anything is how you do everything. And to make your bed takes, what, a minute, 2 minutes? So it's not really time consuming, but they do that even in the military, with angles and centimeters, and it's measured because you start your day with excellence, right? And you take that excellence into other areas of your life because that's the habit. The habit is not meditation or reading books or working out. The habit is showing up for yourself, right? And so it's at a meta level, you do these things because it changes your perception of yourself, right? Your identity. So I make my bed, and by the way, how great does it feel to come back to a made bed, right?
Yeah,
And so that's really easy. After I use the bathroom, I will hydrate, and because I have goals, I drink a lot of water, because you could lose up to 1 pound of water at night through respiration, perspiration, and your brain is mostly water. So, I hydrate. I get those elements that you and Ben talk about. Like, I've done podcasts about this, because it doesn't cost anything. I can go outside first thing in the morning, so I get right? Because the 4 elements, this is back in Greek mythology, Roman mythology, and Babylonian times. They thought everything was made of these 4 elements, right? Earth, air, water, and fire. So I just want to introduce those 4 elements, right? You can get grounded, touch, like barefoot. You can do some breathing, whatever that breathing that, like Dr. John was mentioning, a bunch of it. The water, and then the fire from the sun. And it's just a wonderful way. If you want to win the day, win the first hour of your day. I also have this thing that I've been talking about for 30 years, brushing your teeth. And that's not the brain hack, but try doing it with your opposite hand. Like, challenge yourself. And it's not because, yes, it utilizes a different part of your brain, right? But what it really does, more than that, is it gets you to be present. Because most of us can't do something brand new without putting thought into it, because and you bring presence into other areas of your life, right? You bring that focus, you're exercising, flexing your focus muscles. And also by doing that, you teach yourself unconsciously, I could take on a new habit, right? Something very, very simple. So what other habits can I add that's beneficial, to my life? But notice what I didn't say was touch my phone. I have to give it, I don't want any input first thing in the morning. If anything, I'm more creative and I write. And output.
So I get on Instagram as soon as I wake up. I check my inbox and.
Now, by the way, like I'm sure Gary Vee and Mark Zuckerberg, I'm sure they do that, and I'm not saying that just works for me, but I'm curious if some of these people who did that, and just like when people smoke, so people, the person lives to 100 and there's these outliers. Well, I imagine what if they didn't, yeah.
Awesome.
Are you really on Instagram?
No. Well, I've been doing some really unusual things lately in the morning, and I would like to chime in on some things that you said that I think are really important. Is getting sunlight in your eyes first thing in the morning is really a big, awesome hack. And what I'll do, because I wake up at sometimes 3:30, 4 in the morning. I mean, a lot of people that listen to me in podcasts and so forth, hear this. And so I wake up really early. I think that's, it really works for me. I go to sleep really early, so there's no sunlight. So I use the sauna space lights. That's the first thing. I wake up, I turn those lights on, And I sit and I do a short meditation. And what I've been doing lately is getting right into my art studio, and I've been starting to paint, and I've been really into a few of these pieces. And I really feel that what I would like to share is that, you know, it's something I have so much passion about, and I've noticed that that spilled over to just general passion with everything. So I'm starting out, I'm in the studio, I'm listening to beautiful music. There's some pieces of art I'm really interested in. If you check out your Out-of-Box doc, I've been sharing the progression of a few of these pieces. And just finding something that you really, really enjoy that's not work, that you love. And I find that for me it's been really interesting how that has really showed up for the rest of my life for other things, you know. So that would be one suggestion I would have is if you can get something going in the morning like that. What are the other thing that's a little bit unusual is I have a hyperbaric chamber, right? Yeah. And I've been waking up at like 3, 4 in the morning and going in there and sleeping for an hour or two.
Oh, nice.
Right? So I'm like, dual tasking, right? So I'm sleeping, and I really found that the combination of methylene blue, doing regular saunas, and getting in my hyperbaric chamber has been massive for how I feel. And it's so exciting because when I think about it, it's just something anybody can really do. Now, the hyperbaric chamber's expensive, right? Those things can be $15,000, $20,000, and you might be able to find one used for $10,000. So if you've got the means, you could do something like that. But then there's breath work that we talked about. I keep going back to that. Methylene blue is not terribly expensive. You can get the sauna, you're getting that light, and doing something like that in the morning, man, I mean, it empowers people to have the power of life force and healing in your own house that I think rivals about anything that, you know, I mean, you could go and spend a lot of money at a lot of medical clinics, you know, or a lot of alternative offices, and you may not get anything as good as that if you put those three things together.
Yeah, I just want to say also, whether it's dance or music or however you start your day, bringing joy to things is just, there's an art and a science to it for sure. I would say, like, somebody asked me about burnout. You know, if you feel like the past few years, like you feel a little bit more burnt out or exhausted, you know, some people, they think that they're burnt out because they're doing too much. That might be the case, but sometimes we're burnt out because we're doing too little of the things that make us feel alive, you know, and the things that really, you know, light us up. And so, you know, starting your day with something, you know, that creative pursuit, something where you're in your element, that sparks joy, that you can take that joy throughout the rest of the day.
Yeah. For a lot of people, it's finding something. You know, I've got a lot of friends that I wish I could see them find something that they were, you know, that passionate about. So, you know, would you have any advice for someone with finding something that they would?
So like, and I talk about this a little bit in the book, you know, people use the word passion, like the things that light them up. And it's interchanged with purpose, but I'm kind of stickler for words. And I feel like passion, how I define it, that has utility for me. Passion is something that, it could be a person, activity, hobby, whatever, that lights you up. Passion is something that lights you up. And I don't think we're limited to one passion, right? But I think part of it is experimenting, right? Putting yourself out there, getting stimulus, even with kids, right? Seeing where their passion goes, their attention goes. So passion is what lights you up. I think purpose is how we take our passion and light other people up. Like my passion is learning, right? It wasn't always learning because of my learning difficulties, but my passion is learning. It lights me up so much. But my purpose is teaching other people how to learn so I can light them up, right? And so I feel like the number one thing is first make a decision that you want to find the thing that lights you up. And so, you know, and I think that some of these things are something that's dormant that we haven't explored. Because sometimes I was talking about work, you know, at senior centers, a lot of times it's sedated, like our passion's there, but it's buried under other people's opinions and our fears and expectations of, you know, people around us and stuff. But that's why I like to spend so much time getting people to know themselves. And so giving yourself stimulus and seeing what, you know, draws your attention, the thing that kind of you obsess about, And by the way, like the clinic, one of the things I love is just like all the artwork that you have, that you've created, because it creates a context and a setting, you know, where it just feels very inspired to transform.
Okay. I want to just give you guys a moment if you have any final things you'd like to say. We're coming to the end of our event tonight, and that was such a beautiful way to end it. Anything else?
Well, I would like to acknowledge my staff and my team. All the hard work that went into this event and just running the clinic in general and MitoZen. And we have a lot of people from our team that are here, you know, so I'm very grateful for all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, people, I have to say this, is just not only amazing care the past few days, so thank you for that, because it, you know, hopefully I could pay it forward by having the energy and the thing to do what's important to me. But people don't realize what goes on behind the scenes to produce things like that. There's so many moving parts, so yeah, thank you. Why don't we give a hand for Dr. John also? This is literally the only thing I committed to this month because of, you know, with what I have going on with family. And so this is, for me, like everything is a heck yes or heck no. And like I would leave you with this, that our decisions, you know, change, you know, like we are the sum total of all the decisions we made up to this point in our life, right? Who are we gonna spend time with, what are we gonna eat, what are we gonna do for work, everything, right? Where are we gonna live? And I would say that, you know, for me, I have my love, growth, contribution. I'm very clear about my values, and I feel like people say yes to too many things, and flat out. And when you say yes to somebody or something, make sure you're not saying no to yourself. You know, I have a very loving wife, very supportive. She, you know, like I got her permission. She was like, "You definitely go. This is, you know, like a mission, and come down and take care of myself," because I was, you know, have my health challenges I could be on 3 continents in 1 week. So I'm just saying I really appreciate quality care. Not only people who are extremely world-class competent, but also have character and, you know, and a level of consciousness. And so this was a no-brainer, pardon the pun, to spend time with all of you and everyone watching. So I appreciate that, because your time is the one thing you can't get back. You know, and so I feel like that magic is going to come from all of this, because we create this butterfly effect. You know, the butterfly effect is somebody flapping its wing, you know, butterfly flapping its wings here could create a tsunami across the globe because of dynamic systems, and I feel like we could do that. You know, limitless, I had this question the other day, like, you know, how can you talk about limitless in a limited world? And I was like, you know, like, how do we become limitless in a limited world? We do it together. You know, and that's really, it's the bonds, it's the people like that we spend time with that we're blessed to be able to, and we all need people to encourage us, to challenge us, to cheerlead for us. And if you haven't found that person yet, I think be that person for somebody else, you know. And when it comes to your own personal care, remember that self-care is not selfish, you know, and part of self-care is looking at the mirror and loving that, you know, that person in the mirror who's been through so much, but is still standing. You know, I know that we all have adversity and challenges. We hear a lot about post-traumatic stress, you know, and, you know, I talked to many of you about that. There's also this post-traumatic growth. You know, coming out on the other side, how many of you have gone through adversity that you won't wish upon anybody, but something came out, there was a gift in there. You know, you found a mission, a strength, some kind of clarity or value, and, you know, I feel, again, the life we live, the lessons we teach, and there's a version of yourself that's patiently waiting. And I think the goal is we show up for each other every single day until we're introduced. So thank you very much, everybody. So good to be here. Thank you. So good.
Thank you all so much for coming tonight. I want you to thank yourself also for taking the time out of your day to be here. So thank you all so much. This has been a beautiful evening.
Thanks for hosting.
Thanks.
Yeah,
This was
geez,
fun.
such a good job.
All right. Cheers. Good evening,
Awesome.
everyone.
All right.
Thanks, Tim.
How did this happen?